record. Okay.
Gesundheit.
All right, so 50 again?
Sure. Why not?
Yeah.
Sweet.
My favorite is
Cool.
when time.is skips a number and then it gives you a small heart attack.
Yeah, that happened to me last week. We had to clap again because I was like, I don't know what happened. Hi, Buster. You got food.
Team likes to party all the time, party all the time, party all the time.
Are Allison and Erica joining us?
No.
Erica's
Allison's laptop. Yeah. Allison's laptop is dying.
Oh.
and Erica's head
got
is exploding.
Yeah.
And Sam is parenting.
Yeah.
Legit.
Yeah. It happens.
It's okay.
All right.
Hopefully they'll be able to come for next week's show, and hopefully we've got
A special guest
another guest. Yeah.
who we probably shouldn't name
All
because now we're streaming. And we
Yeah,
don't want to.
I would not make any promises. I wouldn't write any checks that my social media contacting capabilities can't cash.
Sometimes you just gotta put out what you want into the world. It's called The Secret, and good things happen to those who believe.
The Secret, I hadn't thought about The Secret in probably 10 years at least. And then it's come up like twice in the past 2 weeks.
I think it was probably both me.
Yes, I think it was too. But did you just read The Secret?
No.
Did you listen to the
things.
audiobook? Because
No,
I remember that.
I have not.
Popular.
I have not engaged with The Secret ever. I think we watched a video about it like once in a class for some reason.
That's not appropriate for any classroom.
Yeah.
It might have been like a critical thinking thing. I don't remember.
Okay.
It was like freshman year.
Okay.
What? We also watched on April Fool's Day. They showed us like a flat Earth documentary.
What?
And then they were like, okay, so is anybody in this thing credible? Why or why not?
I appreciate
It's a good question.
the teachers of the nation, but also sometimes I'm just like, that's not a
Critical
good
thinking
decision.
skills. You gotta teach it. They were like, okay, what is up with this? And it's like, okay, they've got a college professor, but it doesn't say what college they teach at.
Right.
yeah.
Stuff like, and then like, doing like weird demonstrations with like a plate and an orange or some shit. I don't know.
You're probably
High school.
old enough to know that they weren't actually trying to tell you that the Earth is.
No, yeah, they it was very explicit. Like, okay, what is wrong with this?
Yeah. Well, should we
Yeah, we can get
start this
started.
engine?
Rev it up.
There's literally a
Crank it.
in Yakuza 2 there was literally a mission like description that just said blow this popsicle stand.
Wow. Yeah, because
It's not surprising.
In a good
It's
way.
so good. It's so
It was
good.
so great.
I think I'll get to it in the show. Okay. Hello and welcome to episode 133 of the Gaming Fyx podcast. I am your host. It's August 8th. I got to say that, right? I am your host, Andre Cole, aka your partner's favorite self-help tip. I am joined today by Alex.
Confucian Batman.
Pat.
I was trying to think of any other famous self-help books, but I just was drawing a blank. So I don't have any.
And our very special guest this week, Jeff Davis.
Beep, beep, beep.
Yeah, so self-help book. Typically I would only recommend Alain de Botton in very small doses.
I knew that you would have an
Okay.
actually helpful contribution to that to that intro.
Pinch hitter.
You know, sometimes you gotta help yourself. But today you don't have to, because we're here to help you pick out all the best video games or stay away from the worst video games.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I personally am here bringing you two very good games, in my opinion.
Okay.
I can't speak for anybody else. No, I don't know what you're talking about.
I love it.
Well, I see 3 games, very good games on Alex's list. So, Alex, how about you start us off today?
We're gonna do this, I guess.
So I played Fall Guys.
Oh yes, the best video game of 2020.
I don't know if I go that far.
No, I wouldn't either.
So yeah, Andre talked about it last week. Kind of for those who didn't listen or those who somehow don't know what it is, it's basically a combination of like Takeshi's Castle or Wipeout or, you know, Amexi, which is also Takeshi's Castle, whatever. And then Gang Beasts, I guess, is the closest facsimile. Yep. Just in terms of
Human Fall Flat.
Or Human Fall Flat is another good one. But just that kind of like very
wobbly
physicsy movement and like slamming into other people and just like you jump and then you kind of ragdoll, you know.
Yep. Get knocked out.
Yep. And then there's like you go through courses and there's 60 players, you being one of them. And then it's
a battle royale.
Where
yeah,
a certain amount of people are eliminated per round and you move on to the next round and then eventually one person wins. And it's all wacky fun. And there's like, you're going through courses with big spinning things that are slamming into you and like platforms that are just going crazy and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I played it and then I returned it because I don't really like Fall Guys. It's fine. I think it is the most 3 out of 5 game for me ever. Like, it's fine. It is competent. I am happy that the developers are having such a good time and like it's so profoundly successful. Like, it's insane to see how many people are talking about it. Like, their Twitter community person put out a tweet this morning saying, "Oh, I fell asleep last night and woke up to this," and it's like 500 or 600,000 tweets about Fall Guys in the past hour. So like it's going crazy for them. So for a small team, for an indie game like
made
that's
on
awesome.
A super tight schedule.
Yeah, tight schedule. And yeah, it's very good for them and it's impressive in that sense. I just don't particularly like playing it. So I for me, it's just way too shallow. Like there's just not enough going on.
I think it's pretty honest about what it is up front. Like I don't think there's anywhere where it purports to be more than like if you watch the trailer, that's the game. And I think that it's fairly shallow, but it's kind of not promising a lot more than what it offers. So I think it's a fun game to jump into for like half hour, play a few games, and then so I'm enjoying it. But I could see why anyone would not be a fan too. Like it's also kind of a specific thing, I guess.
Yeah, I could see it I could see it being really awesome if you're couch co-oping it with someone. Like it's you two split screening and also joining a server and then like laughing all the time and be like, "Oh, that was great. Oh, did you see that? Oh, they totally flipped," and then just like clipped through the world and like the physics went crazy. Ha 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 ha. Like that could be great, but like for me, I just found it boring as a solo player. Like I made it to, I think the furthest I made it was the 4th round, maybe the 5th.
That's the final one usually. I think.
Is it?
I think there's 5 rounds. There's 5 rounds.
I definitely made it to the 4th. I don't think I made it to the last one, and like it's like yeah, that was fine, but there was no tension. Because like for me, it feels like you're never truly in control of everything because it throws in enough team games to where it's like, well, if my team is just total garbo and I had one where like you're trying to push the ball to the end of a maze basically like or whatever and literally 2 of my teammates just ran to the end and weren't helping with the ball.
So they were running to the end probably to catch the other team's ball when it hits the end of the maze part to try to throw it off.
But they did that like right from the start.
Yeah, but you have to kind of sprint down there so that you're there when the other balls make it down. That way you're not, because there's only so many people. If everyone just tries to push the ball can get like caught up because you don't need that many people to move it. So usually a couple people will run down to be blockers for when the other team's balls get to the end. And that's, I think, the issue with the team games is there are strategies you can do like that, but the game is like super not clear on like the right ways to play the different modes sometimes.
Well, I mean, that's fine. I don't think there necessarily has to be a right way. Like there's multiple ways you could play things.
No,
like,
yeah, fair.
That's good. That's good game design in terms of being able to do stuff differently, but there's also zero communication in game.
That's, I think, a better way to put it is the game doesn't communicate different strategies. You have to figure them out yourself, and then there's no way to communicate with your team really either. So it makes it difficult. It feels like the team game modes are the one thing I really don't like about the game myself, and I think they're simple and shallow enough that it doesn't feel like you can really learn the skills. But the other issue is that since you can't communicate, you can't do the kind of esoteric stuff that like would be interesting strategically. So yeah, I think the team games definitely are the biggest struggle.
Yeah, and I don't know. Again, for me, it's just a little bit too shallow. It's fine. It's just I don't know how to sound it without sounding rude. It's just like it feels like I think I said in our group chat that it kind of feels like a college project game to me, which I think there are good college project games, but I mean it in the sense it's like you're a first or second or maybe third year college student who just started to learn how to do physics programming, and it's like now I'm going to make a whole game off of the stuff that I learned like in the lesson past rigid bodies, and it's like I think that's probably purely a me thing because I work with code literally every day and have made a lot of games.
Yeah, but I write every day, and I wouldn't say that like since I write every day that I think that's why The Last of Us 2 is bad and other people can't see it, you know? Like so that's why I think that's like a little bit shaky territory, because I think like it can still be fun. It's fine if you just don't like it because you don't like it, I guess is more what I'm getting at. I'm more just saying like it doesn't have to be because you understand it, you know. It's also just can be because you don't think it's very good, which is fair, I think.
That's not the truth though. I think it's good, I just don't like it. Like I can make those mutually exclusive thoughts. Like it's good.
Oh, of course
it is good, and the people who like it are obviously 100% valid in liking it. I just don't like it.
Yeah no, I think that's completely fair.
So
yeah, I think there is something to like the idea that it's a little shallow. I'd like more maps to be in there, or
that's another
at
thing
least them
really
to vary when like levels can show up, because there's like a set. There's a set number or like a set group that can show up in the final round and like the second to final round and stuff like that. And if they just went hog wild and any level could show up in any round, I think maybe you'd have to like level that off and be like, okay, this one's not going to show up here because it would be too easy and it would never end, or not, you know, there wouldn't be a point. But or if they added in like power-ups or something
that could be
like
cool.
Mario Kart style, where as you're going through the course, you're like finding power-ups and they make you super fast, but also you're falling off and stuff like that. I don't know. Yeah,
like for me, like there was kind of a lack of any kind of balancing. Like for a quick example, like it just feels like your character is in there and every mini game is just like there's these set. It's the same characters, it's the same rules. They're not changing anything for anything.
Right.
And like for the one I ran into was the grab the tails off of people one, where it's like normally in a game, if like the very small concept of that mini game is it's a team game, like half of the team has a tail and half of the team doesn't have a tail, and you're trying to grab the tails off of other like opposing teams, and to qualify you have to be one of the teams with the most tails in the end. That's it. And like there's no real balance, there's no like if you have a tail, you move faster or you move slower. It's just you have a tail. It's like not like if you have a tail, you have any special ability or anything like. And again, maybe it's like to some people, like that simplicity is actually desirable. And for me, like you can see it. It's like, oh, it's about the strategy of placement. It's the strategy of I'm going to wait for this person around this corner and jump them or something. Like, yeah, I get that. But like in a lot of in my early rounds, it was just kind of this like elementary school children playing soccer thing of it's just literally 30 people chasing this one person.
Yeah, and that's tough because I think it is about placement for all of those team modes. And I think that like if you have two teams that know what they're doing and know how to position, and then it's a battle of positioning, that's interesting. But the problem is, since you can't communicate, it makes it hard to set that stuff up. I don't think I would like that mode more if people with tails were slower necessarily. But at the same time, that's the only mode that I kind of like in the team play anyway, because I feel like as an individual, at least, I can see where someone might be going and then set myself there. The thing that really frustrates me with the other team games, specifically the ones with balls, is that you move so slow and it takes so long to position yourself. You'll spend 30 seconds getting yourself in position for one play, and then the ball will take a bad bounce, and then you have to spend another 30 seconds positioning yourself, or you'll hit the ball, but there's somebody else there and they'll just knock it back. Like, it feels like you have very little agency in those modes to solve the problem. So I think the things I would like to see that game do is break the team modes out, because I'm sure there are people who enjoy them, and if that's the case, cool. Break those out into their own hopper. There's clearly enough players. I see why they wouldn't have done that at the start, but there's clearly enough players that they can make that work. And then expand on the number of games for sure. I think the thing that's going to determine that game's health over the long term is, I think, how quickly they can rotate in and out new game types, because if it's those same game types for the next 3 months, then it will get stale within a few weeks, I think.
I think the battle pass is for like 2 months. I think it's like 60 days. But they've got more levels and costumes and features on their roadmap, but I don't know if they've detailed when any of that's coming yet.
Yeah, how quickly they can get that stuff out is going to be important, I think.
Yeah, and especially with how hot it is right now.
Yeah, but it's definitely
have. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, with the resources they have, they can definitely they can do whatever they want at this point. They can hire another.
This also isn't like a small dev. This isn't like a small. They're not a huge dev, but it's like Mediatonic, who made like Murder by Numbers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So they're like an established developer.
Yeah, but I think it's totally what you're saying, Alex, is totally accurate. It is very shallow. It is not a deep, mechanically rich game by any sense. I think if you look at that trailer, I think it's very fun in small doses. To me, it's the perfect game. Like, we logged off of whatever more serious competitive game we were playing for the night. Before I go to bed, I'm going to play a round or two of Fall Guys. It's that kind of game. But I also think, like, if you are looking for that kind of thing, it's fun and it's goofy.
Yeah. And there's tons of things we could armchair game design, I'm sure. But like, I'm sure they've probably thought of all of the things we could say.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Like,
no doubt.
It's almost like one of the things I would like is if, like, to mitigate your round issues of like, I don't want to play this game. Have a Mario Kart 8 style, like everybody kind of votes by putting their avatar onto the thing they want.
The only reason that I don't think I like that in theory, but one of the things that kind of bugs me a little bit about the game is, given how thin it is from a rules standpoint, I want those games to just happen as quick as possible. I don't want to. I want the next round to just start and go, because that was actually something. It's less of an issue in the full release, but in the beta, I was like, it takes a long time to find a match and for it to get going, given how fast they go and how simple they are, and the fact that you can just have a bad bounce on the first track and need to find a new match. But that's better in the full release. The matchmaking is pretty quick now. So
if the servers are working, just because of how popular it is.
Yeah.
And I think this is like its first weekend where it's available.
Yeah.
Like
so
widely. So
if you
it's a problem.
The reviews on Steam are mostly positive right now. Again, I don't put a ton of stock in user reviews, but they're mostly positive, and largely the complaints are the team games are frustrating and the servers. So
definitely.
Anyways, do you think you'll play it, Jeff?
Yeah, so this is interesting because I was looking. It's on PS Plus right now.
yes,
Yeah, which is great.
And I'm like sitting here, and usually, with PS Plus, the only ones that I don't download are like the COD ones, because I break out in hives if I play a COD. And like on one hand, I'm like, this is really cute. Like, I'm very charmed by the character. Charming. The design and that kind of thing. I'm like, oh, that's very interesting. And then I read that it was like sort of this multiplayer game, and then the misanthropy kicked in, because I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this with other people. Like, I think maybe it seems like a game, and I really agree with your use case, Alex, where if it's couch co-op, like, I could see this being a game changer as far as like, like a Mario Party kind of thing, where like if they develop it a little bit more and they add a little bit more depth, like as far as couch co-op stuff, this would be fantastic. I always get a little dicey about the necessity of communication, especially when it comes to tactical coordination within multiplayer gaming, given that that's a really fraught side of communication for a lot of folks. And that's just my own experience with like Apex Legends or Overwatch speaking. Sure. But I'm also not going to just completely blanket say that, oh, we can't have tactical coordination at all. You all got to guess.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying for sure.
It sounds fascinating. I don't know if I'm gonna try it. I think I'm gonna wait.
I would
kind of like what I did with Fortnite. It's just sort of like, I'm gonna wait.
I would say from that perspective, one nice feature of it is it actually doesn't even show you the names of other competitors unless you push a button. So I don't know if that was done for streamers. I imagine that was part of it, so that people can not, show the names of the people they're playing with, and to make it harder to stream snipe too. But it does have the nice side effect of, if you are someone who doesn't enjoy playing with other people, if that's a helpful barrier for you, it exists. And then the fact that there is just no communication at all, because like I, for example, have been playing with complete respect to anyone who finds Call of Duty very unpleasant, because it is unpleasant in many ways, not to mention the whole war crimes thing. But I have been playing Modern Warfare with friends quite a bit, because they just built new PCs. And one of the things that one of them is not a fan of competitive multiplayer gaming typically. But I was like, other than the fact that people often have awful usernames mixed in with like porn star names, that you can actually turn off voice and text chat in that game. And I think more features like that are good for multiplayer games, because I have the problem of voice chat gives me fairly bad anxiety, and I can get over it, but then every time I try to get over it, I just get called awful things, and it's awful experience. And then I got very into Valorant for about a week, and then I had a run of 5 games where I got called slurs and stuff in a row, and I was like performing better than the people that were yelling at me, literally yelling at me. So like, I uninstalled that game for that reason. And I think building more games in mind, without needing that communication in mind, is good. And also to find ways to provide, like, Modern Warfare is an interesting example because it has modes it has a mode that is Counter-Strike, that you have to communicate at that level to play effectively, but you can also just not put that mode in the hopper, turn off all the chat, and play like a team deathmatch. So I would like to see more of that. And I think Fall Guys is an interesting example of that as well.
Yeah, no. I think there's a deeper discussion there, but I don't want to.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we could talk
especially
for
about like
hours about that.
communication. Yeah, about communication, trust in gaming, and technical coordination. As a person who is strangely stuck in 2002 with Unreal Tournament.
There's nothing wrong with that. 2002 was a good time in competitive gaming.
It was.
You could play Dota All Stars, and you could play Unreal Tournament, and you could play Quake still.
You know,
you
when
can
else
still
was a
play
good
Quake.
time?
I know you can. Yeah, that's true.
The year was 2012. Is that the year that I'm thinking of for our next game?
It might be, but also before that.
Okay,
Jeff, I do agree that one of the things I might do is also wait, and like I'm still gonna pick it up on PS Plus and just have it in the account. So in the event that in a year it's a way better game, or not a way better game, a more appropriate game for what I'm interested in, then at least it's there. So I hope for its continued success. I'm just not gonna play it for until.
Also, on it being cute, I typically find games that are largely aesthetic and that lean on a cute aesthetic to be fairly off-putting to me. In this case, this is an exception. I adore everything about the visuals of this game and the characters, and I want to get all the costumes because they're all very adorable, and I want to look at them in the character select menu. Yeah. So, yeah,
they're basically ice cream personified.
Yes.
Yeah. I was going to ask,
ice cream beans
or potatoes? I can't tell.
Yeah.
they refer to them as jelly beans.
But
I believe
that's a good one, actually.
The Gordon Freeman costume is very, very good. It's very good.
I've got the Alex top. I don't have the bottom.
I'm not good enough at it to get those. But
speaking of potatoes and ice cream as mutually exclusive things, Monty Valles, who will be a guest on this show in a few weeks, spoilers, was just recently did a road trip from West Coast to East Coast because she's moving to New York. And I don't remember if she stopped in Idaho, maybe, that she had like a potato.
An ice cream potato.
An ice cream potato. Yeah. Like you can find it on her Twitter where it's like a baked potato on the bottom, but like then a bunch of ice cream. It's like an ice cream sundae, but the base is a potato. And she said, it's the most white person thing she's ever had. She's not white. And B, it was fucking awesome, is what she said. Anyways,
okay.
We'll have to ask her about that when she's here.
Yeah. I'll have to ask if it's worth braving the horrors of Idaho for me to pop over there and get an ice cream potato and COVID.
You make your own. Like, I don't.
No,
get potatoes.
That's not the kind of thing you want to bring into your house.
That's not the energy you want to bring.
No, you don't want to, because once you make one ice cream potato, then you're like, well, I can make it again. If you make that stay in Idaho,
I got this whole 5-pound bag of potatoes.
Got this big
20 pound. That's the size you buy.
20-gallon thing of ice cream.
God,
if you give a mouse a ice cream potato.
Anyways,
I think that's actually in the DLC for Frog Fractions, is you sell ice cream potatoes instead of lemonade.
Oh, is that what you want to talk about? All right.
I mean, it looks like you want to talk about it.
Yeah, I thought the 2012. That's interesting because I thought your 2012 reference was to Trackmania, but
no, it was Frog Fractions.
I was playing both Frog Fractions and Trackmania in 2012. So
yeah, same. That's where I thought that was going. Frog Fractions Game of the Decade edition came out on Steam last week. I think.
Yeah, last week.
Yeah, sure.
Or this week. I think it launched this week. It was up on Steam for like wishlist stuff, but it launched this week, I believe.
Sure. Yeah. Either way, I played it this week. And for those not in the know, Frog Fractions is an
edutainment game, and that's all.
Made in the Flash engine. So it's very simple.
And that is going away later this year.
Yep. So that is why creators Twinbeard ported it over to Steam into like some native client. And so the entire game is available on Steam for free, which is excellent. And there is also a $9 DLC you can get, which gives the frog a hat.
Which is on sale for $8 right now.
Yeah.
Definitely only gives you a hat, nothing else.
That's it.
Yeah. Yep. So
definitely wink, wink.
I don't know how to talk about Frog Fractions because, Jeff, do you know what Frog Fractions is?
All I know is that everyone speaks extraordinarily cryptically about this edutainment game, and that's giving me Doki Doki Literature Club vibes.
It is a precursor to that in some ways, yeah.
It is Doki. It is in some ways, but also it's a little less. I think
much more lighthearted.
Yes, the thing with DDLC is I actually think there are some content warnings you need going into that are hard to like. You kind of give up the goose if you provide those content warnings, but also they're kind of necessary because there's some stuff in there. Whereas Frog Fractions, I can just say to everyone, just play it. Just go play it.
Yeah. And Frog Fractions, it's relatively wholesome the whole way through, except for some stuff that depends on your views on things, but it's fine. It's fine. So yeah, that makes it really hard to talk around.
Yes, because I'm also spoiler proof too, so I'm okay if you want to talk about it.
The whole thing about Frog Fractions is subversion, right? Like when you played it in 2012 and someone just handed you this link of whatever twinbeard.com/frogfractions, here play this educational game, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm totally eating these bugs and collecting these apples, cool. You're like, oh yeah, and then the surprise is when it is no longer that.
Yeah, there's just a moment.
It's one of those games where you go, okay, I don't know why you sent this to me, and you close it, and then you hear people talking about it like 2 months later. You go, why are people talking about this thing so weirdly? Yeah. And then you go and you try it again. You go, oh.
And I mean, it's so an easy one to talk about without ruining the thing, because I also am wary of ruining the thing for the new DLC, because I haven't had a chance to take a look at it, and I'm a fan of the series.
Yeah,
I actually never even played Frog Fractions 2. I just remembered to buy it, so I do it.
Frog Fractions 2 was the friends we made along the way to Frog Fractions 3.
To Frog Fractions 3. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't play Frog Fractions 3. So a less spoilery way, because it's just there on the Steam page if you look at it. If you were to purchase the Frog Fractions Cinematic Universe bundle, you would receive the iconic Cap DLC for the re-release of Frog Fractions. And you would also receive a game called Glittermitten Grove. And so there was a Kickstarter for Frog Fractions 2.
Yep.
And the Jim Stormdancer, right?
Yeah, I don't know if that's his actual name. It's his Twitter name, at least.
Yeah, and I also believe that's what he goes by from a developer perspective. Anyway, they did this Kickstarter, and it was like, well, doesn't it having a Kickstarter ruin the concept of Frog Fractions? Because then you're kickstarting a thing. And Twinbeard was like, well, nah.
Jim Crawford
was like, nah, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. It'll be interesting. And then there was a huge ARG that involved people like him and some actors showing up on a street, and I think it was San Francisco or Oakland, and then being kidnapped by like time police while some backers stood there and watched. And there was like there's video of it. There's like this whole performance art piece. And then eventually people got sent keys for this game called Glittermitten Grove, which they kind of framed as like, this
happened, I think, afterwards, because the thing that he said was, I will not announce what the game, you have to find Frog Fractions 3. Once it is found, I will give it up. I will say, yes, there it is, and people will get their game. But until then,
So basically it involved a lot of people just looking at Steam new releases and being like, is this Frog Fractions? Is this Frog Fractions? Like, for like almost a year.
Yeah.
Like, this
and then there was
a long time.
Then this Glittermitten Grove game came out, which this is only like not a spoiler now, because he said this is what it is and you get it in this bundle. But it's this like kind of weird management game where you manage like a fairy colony in a forest. Yep. And then eventually something happens,
if you underground or something.
Yeah, if you dig underground far enough, then, and it's like a very simple but competent management game. And then if you dig underground far enough, then suddenly it turns into frog fractions.
Yeah.
And so
then all the frog fraction stuff you want to have happen
and
happens.
it's very wild. So
And you
that's
can
just kind of
import
like
your Mass Effect 2 save.
Yep.
So in from what I have heard, without spoil, yeah, you can import your Mass Effect 2 save.
Wait,
yeah, that's a real thing you can do. Yeah, it has an actual effect.
I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah, so you should play Frog Fractions. I think you, Jeff, in particular, should play the Cinematic Universe bundle.
Yeah.
And it sounds like people who are interested should play the Iconic Cap DLC. And
fans of the series should play with the Iconic Cap on.
One, Ben Pack put it in a very good but still cryptic way, I think, which he said that the Iconic Cap DLC is the Frog Fractions of Frog Fractions, which is that's what has my interest peaked to play it, even though I kind of have an inkling as to what it is. There are
news stories out there saying what it is, but if you don't know what it is, then
yeah, right.
I still think it is worth going in fresh. Yeah. I mean, at this point, everyone knows that the DLC is a thing. So like, and if you're the only problem I have with Frog Fractions, like it's not even a problem. It's a mental state of mind, is that like, again, we get back to the, you play it that first time and it subverts your expectations and you're like, but you can only capture that lightning in a bottle once. As soon as anything else has the name Frog Fractions on it, you have that expectation set in mind.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not as organic. Like it does weird stuff and you're like, oh, that was clever and that was cool. It's not like, what the fuck is this game? It's like, no, it's a known quantity that it's going to be a what the fuck is this game?
I think it's worth saying too, it's good because it does, even knowing that there's something weird there, you're still going to go in, as long as you don't see it all laid out and go, oh my God, now this is ridiculous. But I don't think any of it is particularly good other than being funny. Like it's the things that it does. I don't know that I think they are, the writing is very good throughout it. That's the thing. Yeah. But mechanically it's never a game that I go like, oh, I got to go back and play Frog Fractions because it's so good.
There's some mechanical depth to this one. I won't say how or why.
Yeah. No, I don't definitely don't want to know, but that's interesting.
But once we're a month or two out, I can start drawing some comparisons.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Anyways,
outside of the surprise element, like the novelty element, the twist, is there stuff to dig into after the twist? Like once you're starting to once you're looking for the subversion, I think is what I'm trying to say.
The twist.
Okay, good.
That's kind of the answer to that question, really.
Excellent. All right, so that's further convincing, because I don't want it to be like, I'm M. Night Shyamalan, the video game.
No, it's not like that at all. No. I wouldn't say it's that. I could see why you would think that, but it's definitely not. It is definitely a journey for sure.
I can only speak to the first game, the original Frog Fractions, but it's not a one trick frog.
No, by no means.
No. Okay. There's one thing I do want to talk about, and I don't think it's a spoiler at all. With the original Frog Fractions, there's the art of the game, and there's the very cartoony frog, like it looks like an MECC game, and it has the big tongue. Yeah. You get into the game, and it's literally just like an actual cutout of sprite of an actual photograph of a frog, basically, but it's also colored in for style. They play into that, and the box art frog versus real life frog, they kind of get into that kind of stuff, which is very funny. They get into how you can sign your name on that ID in the first game, and there's some pretty funny jokes about that. It is worth playing the first game. It doesn't make that many references to the second game, which I did finish back when it came out. There's some, but
it didn't seem as compelling as the first game necessarily. But
it was okay. I wouldn't say it was great. I think this DLC is better because it's shorter. Because Frog Fractions OG is great because you can probably get through it in an hour, maybe an hour and a half.
It's short, for sure.
And Frog Fractions 2 was maybe 8 to 10 hours, and that could get a bit
What?
draining. I think.
Yeah, it's kind of a long game.
News to me.
Yeah. Well, we don't have to get into it because I know a lot about that second Frog Fractions video game, and that's part of why I didn't play it, is because it seemed like a larger thing than I was interested in engaging with at the time. Yeah.
And this one is short. Like, I got through it in probably about 2 hours,
Cool.
including the after credits sequence, which that's all I'll say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways, yeah,
Anyway.
it's worth checking out. If you haven't played Frog Fractions, it's still, I think it holds up in a lot of ways just because it's so weird.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. People should check it out. People should play Frog Fractions.
It's free. The Frog Fractions Game of the Decade edition is free. The iconic.
I do need to bone up on my fractions. I mean, I've been in humanities too long.
There's a lot of fractions.
There's actual fractions in it. That's for sure. You will learn some and practice some real fractions.
Awesome.
Yeah, get some business practice in there too.
And talk about wrestling. Oops. Anyways, speaking of 2012, though, Andre.
I think. What do you want to talk about? Trackmania?
Hell yeah, for like 20 seconds.
Okay. Yeah, it's still Trackmania.
Trackmania continues to be really good, y'all. Though the only issue I'm finding is servers are getting less populated.
Yeah, I'm getting bored,
which
to be
is
honest.
Par for the course with Trackmania.
Yeah, I feel like it's the same tracks. Every time I log in, it's the same tracks, and I don't think that they're particularly fun to play on all the servers that I frequent.
Yeah,
I think there needs to be some time for people to get real wild with their stuff.
Yeah.
And like still like to make good weird tracks as opposed to just like bullshit.
Yeah.
Oh, totally. And there's a lot of bullshit tracks, but there's some I've run into which I'm like, yeah, this is exactly what I want out of Trackmania. It's just that now there's fewer people playing it, so you don't get the kind of group joy of seeing, like, going through your first time through a map and seeing 40 people slam into a wall at the same time because we didn't know that you're not supposed to take this turn, kind of stuff, like, which is pretty funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, Trackmania continues to be really good. That's all we really need to say, I guess.
All right. Well, going back to like even further, maybe 2010? Is that when was 2010? When was that first Avengers movie?
Oh,
2010, I think, right?
I think it was the first Avengers.
2011.
Yeah, you kind of got to go back to Iron Man, right? I mean, Yeah.
I mean, this was 2012. It was 2012 too. No, we're sticking right in 2012. We're not going anywhere. Iron Man got a game. So did Captain America, the first Avenger. That got a game too. And Thor.
Iron Man got a game. It's coming out soon. It's in VR.
No, that is out.
That's out.
It's
That's
like top of the charts in like Europe or something.
I've heard really good things about it, actually. It's supposedly quite good.
Cool. I thought it was that next week.
I mean, literally the last Avengers game I played was literally Captain America and the Avengers.
I think that was the last one they made. Well, I mean, there's like Marvel Heroes and stuff, but that's like they stopped doing tie-ins.
That's only because this game has been in development for like 6 years.
Isn't Captain America and the Avengers the arcade game from like the early 90s?
Oh, maybe. Oh,
yeah. That's what I thought you were talking about too. That game slaps.
Okay.
That is a good game.
It's awesome. It's kind of like it's a beat 'em up basically.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the X-Men arcade game or the Simpsons. Yeah, it's good.
Okay, so what if they took like a beat 'em up arcade game, but then made it over the shoulder and like in the year 2020, and it was all the Avengers, but it was bad.
I think bad is a little harsh, but it certainly has. It wasn't
good.
I would say it's uneven.
Before we get into any of this, Sam is not here. He's the biggest Avengers fan. His thought on it to start is, quote, "I'm happy with it. Looking forward to full release even more."
So I love Sam dearly as a close personal friend. Like, I think of Sam as family. So this is not digging on Sam. That is what he would have said about this game, no matter what it was.
He does like Marvel quite a lot. He did.
I also like Marvel quite a lot.
because of Spider-Man.
Yes. I also
That's a
like
whole other thing we'll talk about.
Marvel quite a lot. Yeah. Not. That's a whole other thing. I would say that it is a game that I am enjoying, but I also don't think it's particularly good. So
see, it's like the opposite of me and Fall Guys.
as a fairly not as big a Marvel fan as Sam, but a fairly big Marvel fan, I would say that it's not a very good game, but I'm also going to play it still.
So this weekend is the closed beta for Marvel's Avengers by Crystal Dynamics, which has been in development for some time.
That just made me realize, Pat, you are the ideal customer for Crystal Dynamics. This game's bad, but I'm going to play it.
Oh no, I'm aware of that. Yeah. I mean, I'm also probably going to play the atrocious PlayStation 4 version of it because I want to be able to play as Spider-Man. Which is like, I hate it. I hate that. It is, we can talk about that part in news later, but yeah, I am excited to not have a good time with the Avengers.
Yeah, but sorry for interrupting, Andre. What were you going to say about?
Oh yeah, no, I was just kind of, well, what are we talking about? We're talking about this new Avengers game that has, in my opinion, shown pretty poorly up until recently.
Oh yeah.
But it is still basically exactly what I thought it was ever since they did that first reveal like 2 years ago, I think. Was that when it was? Yeah, 2 years ago at E3. In that really bizarre presentation where they're like, and here's all the Avengers.
All
and
your favorites.
Here's a video of the actors sitting on a couch talking about what makes each Avenger unique. And who was it? Nolan North was like, well, Tony Stark is interesting because he's like, he wears this mask where he's Iron Man, and he's Tony.
So funny. It was just like
they were acting like we haven't spent more than a decade,
with the exception of Laura Bailey, who I feel like kind of already was there. Everyone else was like, I haven't heard of these characters until they put the script in front of me. What interesting original characters.
It's just
Actually, Nolan, we've been exploring that issue with Iron Man for like the past 60 years, but thanks for joining us.
But everyone knows about it in the last decade.
Yeah.
And it's just,
I do love Nolan North. But so, okay, Pat, there was some very directed language you used, and I'm curious. I know the answer. This is for the audience.
Yeah.
You referenced the atrocious PS4 version. What makes the PS4 version so atrocious?
So, well, I need to be careful.
What frame rate do movies play at?
24.
Do they think this was a movie? Is that why this game runs so bad?
So I want to preface this with like, I keep doing this in our chat because I don't want to come off as a PC like snob. I play most games on PC. I am privileged to be able to afford to have a pretty beefy PC, so I can play most stuff that comes out at pretty high specs with really high frame rates. And I'm aware that that's like something that not everyone A has access to or B cares to invest in, and that's totally fair. And I don't want to like, if you look at Avengers and go, I think this looks fine, that it's totally valid and it's good. I'm glad. I wish I could view it with those eyes personally. When I look at that game, it looks like a sludgy mess to me. Like the visuals are not particularly good. There's nothing in the, I don't think the character models look particularly good. I think the hair is weird as hell. It does not look good at all.
It's very like PS3. There's no physics on it. They don't have NVIDIA hair works. Very
PS3 is how I would describe a lot of how that game looks to me. The textures are pretty poor. The models in the environment are extremely simple. It's a lot of boxes. And the art design in general feels really generic to me, like really, really, really simple and not interesting. And then it also runs like shit. So I don't understand what's going on. What it does is, so on PC, it has per object reflections and per object motion blur that make it look considerably better. On console, it doesn't have those things really. And yet it still has this weird like micro stutter thing happening where it consistently runs at around like 23 frames per second, which is not good if you are
it's in the war zone area specifically.
It's in the mission. I think it's in the story missions that it consistently runs at a poor frame rate, but it's playable. It's very playable in the story missions. It's like, after I was playing it for like 15 minutes, my brain kind of did the like, okay, this is the frame rate we're running at, and I was able to deal with it. There were still moments where I was like, oh, why this should be smoother, but I could live with it. And so when I finished the story stuff, I was like, well, it doesn't run great. It doesn't look great. I still enjoy the combat, and some of the set piece stuff is fun. And I like the characters. I like the performances, even though I think the writing is like, it feels, I don't want to bash the writing staff too much, but it feels like they read a collection of different comic books and then kind of cut and paste dialogue from them without really understanding the intent behind a lot of that dialogue.
I mean, saying you like the performances of Laura Bailey, Nolan North, Troy Baker,
exactly. I mean, these are fantastic performers, so I like the character that they bring to the heroes. So that's the thing I think that's going to pull me through the experience, because I really like their interpretations of these characters, even if I think the writing is a little flat. But when I got through that campaign stuff last night and into the like Avengers initiative, because this game is really two games. It's a single player story driven game where you play through a plot bringing the Avengers back together, which I'm interested to play through. That's the reason why I'm like, I'm going to get this game and enjoy it, because that seems, again, not great writing so far, but I think it's passable and it'll be fun. But then after that, the idea is that it turns into a Destiny, and you're doing repeatable like semi-open world missions, and then smaller repeatable things, either cooperatively or solo, and kind of grinding out loot and stuff for your characters, which is sort of present in the campaign but doesn't matter as much, it doesn't feel like. And a lot of those systems, I actually like the way they're implemented. I think the loot is more interesting in this game than it is in some other games that have just tacked that on. I think the skill tree system, when I have gotten skill points, I've actually had to stop and go, I don't know, all of these sound kind of cool. What do I want to get the skill point in? So that stuff is pretty interesting. And I think the combat is just interesting enough. I need to play it at harder difficulties. I actually think at harder difficulties, it could be challenging in a way that makes you really think about skill and gear set. But the problem is those Warzone missions suck from what I've seen. They're just terrible.
Like suck.
It's
how?
like they, first of all, so they're again sort of semi-open worlds. It drops you in, and this is actually a concept that I think is cool. It drops you into a pretty large space. We're talking like maybe the size of, I would say even bigger than like a battlefield map. It's pretty big chunks of territory, and you have an objective that's kind of far away. And then on the way there's little things for you to stop and grab. Again, almost kind of like Destiny mission zones to an extent, except that they're just for you. You're not seeing other players move around except for the people either playing with you or your AI companions. And you might stop and like, oh, there's a bunker here. We're going to go in and get this chest. And oh, there's some enemies here. We're going to fight them. But the problem is that the mission design is, from what I've seen so far, maybe it'll be different in the final game. The mission design is you're dropped in, you have to run half a kilometer, you go there, you beat some guys up, done. That's the mission. There's no like depth at all to the mission structure whatsoever. And at that point, it's like, well, why am I doing this? Why just put me in a room with guys and let me fight them then? And then maybe it won't run like absolute ass. Because like, That's the other issue, is it runs so poorly that there was a point in this New York mission that I did. I was in a back alley and it like dropped the resolution, the like render resolution, to compensate and try to get the frame rate up, and it looked like almost like a PS2 game. For a second.
Pat, you're obviously, I know what your problem is. You're playing on a launch PS4, right?
No, I'm on a PS4 Pro. So this is not in performance mode, because it's plugged into a 1080p monitor. So like, yeah, it was like someone like got behind the screen and rubbed Vaseline all over it. Like it got this like greasy look, and I couldn't see what was happening. I just kept mashing buttons, which works because the combat's really simple. And it still ran at like 15 frames per second. So
are you sure you weren't playing the Stadia version and your network hiccuped?
That's what it looked like. That's the thing. And that's the like, I can put up with the basic level design to a degree. Like that's fine. I love these characters. So like each character has a battle pass. I don't know what that's going to mean for like purchasing. I have no idea if they're going to charge you per character. I don't think they will. I think these are like,
no,
I think
every character is free.
Yeah, I mean, all the characters are free forever.
It's
all the post-release.
It's also not clear if that stuff, like, because none of the stuff you get in the beta carries over into the full game, so it's not clear if any of that stuff is timed. You're getting challenge points by doing daily and weekly challenges with those characters, and those are how you level up the pass.
Yeah,
and there's like currency and a skin in there, and like. Name cards, things like that.
I don't think they're going to charge you for those battle passes. I think the only thing they're going to charge you for is boosts, and then also skins, just skins, and that's fine. I actually think that works in this game, because if you want to look like Hulk from issue 87 of Planet Hulk or whatever, then you can. Like they're doing very specific skins. The stuff in the beta is pretty meh, but they have shown some skins coming after release that are pretty cool. So, and I think people will buy them enough to kind of fund further development of the game. And it sounds like all the gameplay relevant stuff will be free. I cannot believe that they will charge you per character for battle passes.
No, I don't think
sounds that. Impossible to me, even with as bad as the business around this game is. That seems like too much. So because like I could deal with the mission structure of I'm gonna grind out Captain America's battle pass, I'm gonna put a podcast or a movie on and sit and just like brawler my way through a bunch of enemies, but it has to run. Like if the game is like upsettingly poor in its performance, then I don't know how to. I mean, that doesn't work. And I think what's so frustrating is because of the business that they've built up around this game. Like, yes, I could just go play it on my PC, but then I can't play. I mean, well, and we'll talk about this a little more in news, but then I can't play as my favorite character in the Marvel universe. And I could start on PC, but then when PS5 comes out and maybe it runs better there, if I end up getting one of those, then I've started on PC and I can't carry my progress back over into that. So like, I guess I'm just going to suffer on PS4 and play a pretty shitty version of the game, because at some point I want to play as Spider-Man on the PS5. Like, it just feels so bad. It's such a, like, I can't express enough how much I hope people don't buy this game or play it, even though I'm going to buy it and play it, because I'm just like, it sucks. It sucks so much.
So have they clarified, like, are there going to be raids in this? Like
yes,
okay.
Or not raids, but end game cooperative content, where they're like, they call them raids, but they've got a variety of end game content that you can do.
They've also
Infinity
said
War content. Yeah.
They've also said that they won't call them raids because they have a cooler name for them.
Oh God. Why?
One thing they have said is they are aware of the performance issues with performance mode on the PS4 Pro and are going to be hopefully getting that ironed out before launch. And like, who knows how old this beta is? Maybe it could be like a month old or something. And so, like, the last 90% of the game comes together. Like, the last 10% is the hardest bit of the game to get together.
Yeah.
but
I'm hopeful
it's
that
real rough.
it sounds like this may actually be the demo that they showed people a year ago. So I don't think the build is necessarily a year old, but I stumbled on a Digital Foundry like preview, and I was like, oh, they played the beta, and they were talking about all of the same stuff from that we're playing. Like the conversation was like, oh yeah, they played in the press beta last week. And then they said, well, it still has a year to go. And I looked at the date of the video, and it was actually from 2019. So, so it sounds like this could be potentially a pretty old build, and maybe the performance issues will be worked out.
Then why put that out unless it's like the matchmaking in this for the multiplayer stuff is atrocious, and in my experience it doesn't work. I got into like one game with another person, and they have you can't double up characters, so you can't have like 4 Hulks or like 2 Iron Men and like a Black Widow and a Kamala Khan or whatever. So you have to get someone playing each different character. But I was waiting for like a group, so I was like, okay, whatever, let's see what this matchmaking is. Waiting for like 10 minutes, and I got like a Hulk and then nobody else. And like, okay, well, can we start? It's like, nope, someone's trying to join your game. I'm sitting on this menu screen for 10 minutes. Yeah. And then eventually I like, okay, finally let's start. And then it crashed, and it's like, nope, you're disconnected.
Networking stuff I can forgive a little more than like, I just don't know how much to believe that they're going to get the performance in line. And I wouldn't even really care personally that much if it weren't for all of the other marketing bullshit around this game. Because to me, it's like, if you, and to Sony too, not just to Crystal Dynamics, but if you're going to do the kind of deals that they're doing, you kind of have a responsibility to make your platform at least a competent place to play the game. And I like a responsibility to people who are going to buy it based on the fact that you're locking a bunch of shit up. So, I don't really know to me, it's a pretty clear, like, man, fuck Sony right now. And this is not a great way to kick off the next generation. I certainly don't have any warm feelings about them right now. It's just kind of a crappy state of affairs, I think. But like, the performance of aside, the game could be a good foundation. I think the mission design stuff that I'm talking about is the kind of thing that if at launch it's a bunch of boring, grindy missions, that could kind of suck. But if they take that platform, like I said, there's a lot of interesting things I think happening around the periphery of what's going on. And I think it could be in ways that are better than like an Anthem. To me, Anthem's problems seemed very apparent from the first trailer that they showed. Like when they were first talking about it, I was like, I don't know, this looks very half-baked to me. And Avengers doesn't necessarily feel half-baked. I mean, it's subjectively, I think there are people who just won't like it, but it doesn't necessarily feel half-baked to me in terms of the way that the loot and skill progression works. It's just that the mission design is not good for the repeatable stuff that they've shown in the beta. And like, that's, who knows. And I should also say, I've played 2 of the Warzone missions. They were almost identical. I don't even really know what I did in them because there was a marker on screen and I ran towards it and then I fought some people and then it was done.
You probably stood on some platforms.
I think I did.
Meter go up, and
I think some
enemies stood on those platforms, and then their meter started going up, and you had to stand on it instead. And
yes. Which actually, the area control stuff is the one interesting thing in the missions that I think it actually plays kind of like a domination mode in like a Call of Duty or Battlefield or whatever, where you have to capture points, and then the AI tries to take them from you. That was actually kind of cool. I will hand it to them. But maybe I'll play a few missions today and I'll go, oh, this is actually really interesting. But they gotta get that performance someplace that's playable. Like they need to find a middle ground between performance and visuals, because it looks bad too. If it looked really good, I could say, well, we can take a hit on some of these reflections and particle effects, but that stuff doesn't look good. So I don't understand where the performance is going. And that needs to be sorted, I think, because at 60 frames per second, the combat feels good. There's little moments where you get in small rooms with like 2 or 3 enemies, and you do one combo, and it's like, oh, actually, when this is running smoothly, it's not very deep, but it's interesting and kind of, or it feels good, I should say. And I just want more of that, I guess.
So sorry, go for it, Jeff.
I was going to ask Pat. So everything I've seen about this game and everything that you're saying, it seems like this game, on one hand, it's really unfortunate that like this is the game that we get Kamala Khan being something other than a side character that you can collect in Ultimate Alliance.
And she's great in it too, I should say.
Oh,
she has the best writing of any of the characters that I've seen.
Yeah,
that's
by far.
Doubly discouraging because like, oh, okay, Kamala Khan's great, but their game's shit.
Yeah, when she's centered too, for sure.
Okay, that's good. But one thing that I wanted to ask is that I wonder if this game is gonna if it's going to suffer from the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. problem, by which I mean having to straddle that weird liminal space between comics and translating comics for a more generalized audience that are used to the cinema, and that actually helped, you know, create this sort of weird place that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. sort of was in, where it was like it could decide which one it wanted to be, and it didn't end up pleasing either one. Apologies to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fans. I'm sure it's very good.
No, I'm with you. That's the same issue that I had with it.
Do you get that feeling?
I don't think they're trying to like. They're definitely not trying to pull and be like, oh, hey, the MCU. Remember that? They want to be their own thing.
Yeah.
And they're setting themselves up where they can pull in anyone from Marvel that they want, and just like, we're pulling them in, and they've got a story, and then you can take them into whatever you want whenever, which is nice.
So
even if the story is a little reminiscent of some of the seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Right. So with that in mind, and like setting aside performance issues, like maybe that will be ironed out in the last 10% that isn't being shown. Like that is optimization always comes last. So I'll give them that benefit of the doubt. And even if the story, the moment to moment dialogue feels like copy and paste out of context quotes, does any part of it feel particularly ambitious, or does it feel like they're playing it safe?
So I actually think that dovetails really nicely with Jeff's question, because I think the part that does feel ambitious to me is it does feel like they are trying to build an identity for this thing that is separate from both the MCU and the comic books, but also draws from each of them for its inspiration. And I think it's relatively effective at that. I don't necessarily think it's trying to translate comic books in the same way that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. does. I think it's more complex than that to a degree, because they're doing smart things like in that opening mission on the Golden Gate Bridge, you don't really know what's going on, but like Taskmaster shows up, and as Widow, you have a fight against Taskmaster, and it's comic book Taskmaster. It is not like a movie-fied Taskmaster. It is Taskmaster with the skull mask and the sword and the shield, and it's very cool. That fight is like, it feels scripted. Like, it doesn't feel.
It's a tutorial fight.
It's a tutorial fight, but it's a good one. I think it's, aside from the fact that it crashed on me while I was doing it. It's a good fight, and I think that was kind of the moment where I was like, oh wait, maybe I like this. And so I think they really are. And like, I'm not gonna, if you're really worried about spoilers about the beta, tune out, I guess. But there's a mission you do they just call it the Pacific Northwest. I don't know where it seemed like it was on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington, but I don't know. It could have been in Oregon. It could have been anywhere. You do a mission with Kamala and Bruce, and most of it, playing as the Hulk in that game just has problems, because it's like he can punch a tank in the opening mission and blow it up like he should be able to, but then you meet like 5 robots and each of them takes like 6 punches to knock out, which is like, you're the fucking Hulk, man. Like, what are they doing to you? They're doing you dirty right now. But his super ability, like his powers, feel good. Those are pretty powerful. Anyway, though, like, you fight Abomination in this mission, and it's a pretty good Abomination, and it's a pretty good fight. Like, it's it's broken up in some ways by the like AAA boss fight thing where you get to a certain health bar and then a little cinematic part happens. And I don't love that. I much prefer the, you know, Soulsian, like, no, here is the boss and now you will fight sort of thing. But that aside, I think the fight plays pretty well. And you have to sort of recognize his patterns, and then you have to dodge them and counter and jump at right times and stuff. It feels like a pretty good boss fight. And the ending of what happens in the boss fight, I don't know how Abomination is going to show up in future content, because the things that the Hulk does to that being's body are brutal.
It's like some Arkham Asylum Solomon Grundy status almost.
I was like,
not that bad, but
I was like, one, how is this a teen-rated video game? And two, this kind of rules.
It's because they smear Vaseline all over the screen and stuff like that happens.
So anyway, I think in that regard, it feels ambitious in the sense that they clearly have ambitions for this to be a platform for greater storytelling and longer term concepts. And I really hope this is really the bottom line of why I'm going to get it and play it, because I really hope that they get there through criticism and feedback. And I hope that, because I say I hope people don't buy it, I'm half kidding. I think that because it has Marvel on the name, people will play it because it will get that walking past it and seeing it on the shelf thing of, oh, it's an Avengers game. And that's part of why I think that they're pushing it out when they are, because then now they have 2 months before it's holidays. And in that 2 months, they can tighten screws, and then hopefully people just buy it because it says Marvel's Avengers on the box. And then
also there's not been a Marvel thing this year, right?
Right. No.
Yeah.
And so, and I think that the team is earnestly trying to make a cool thing. I don't think, it doesn't feel like they were handed a license and said, make something, and this is the thing that they're putting as little effort as they can into. I think they are trying hard, and I really give them credit for trying to do something interesting.
But it's also a studio has not done a service game or multiplayer game.
Yeah.
Really. Make it like doing their first crack at it with a massive IP that pre-existing that, you know, is one of the most popular things on the planet at the moment.
Yeah.
I think
at least Anthem was original. They don't have to live up to external expectations.
Right. And I think that hopefully those external expectations will push them to develop this game further, and with tapping into the more interesting parts of that mission design, better performance. And I think that we're missing some of the character interactions and depth of the full game in the beta. So I don't want to, the combat feels kind of shallow, but I think if you just play a little bit of Destiny, the combat feels shallow. Like if there's so many tools in the toolbox that you just don't get access to in the beta for these characters.
Also, if you played Destiny on launch day, or let's say Destiny 2 on launch day versus Destiny 2 yesterday, like there's also a big difference between those two, right?
Yeah.
I would say that the thing that saves Destiny is like it plays like second to none, like mechanically. It just feels really good.
Yeah.
The left trigger, right trigger is like top class.
Strong with Destiny. Yeah.
Whereas I would not like, it's the combat and like the moment to moment gameplay is serviceable, save like some of the platforming stuff. But I wouldn't say it's like anywhere near top class for the kind of game it is, for like the kind of combat is going for.
I guess I don't know setting Souls aside, because I don't think it's going for that at all.
What's more Devil May Cry, Ninja Gaiden,
I guess Devil May Cry is a good one.
The Metal Gear Rising Revengeance.
Many of those kinds of games just feel very samey to me anyway. So to me, it's like, it feels good enough, I guess, because I generally am not crazy about those kinds of games in the first place. So I wonder if that's part of why I'm able to kind of look at it and go like, oh, okay, well, I get this. I would hope that there's little things in there that I found a little frustrating, like when you first play, you play as Captain America in the opening mission. You don't get to play as him for the rest of the beta. There's like a moment where they're like, oh, hold the circle button to vault over people with shields. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I wonder if this is a unique thing that Cap can do. It's not. Everybody can do that. Everybody does that. You have to do that with everybody to deal with shield enemies. And I think that is sort of the parts where I suspect perhaps in the future, within the first year, they will try to redesign some of that mechanical stuff and differentiate the characters a bit more, perhaps, because I think that they will get a lot of pushback on that. I don't know. I think it's justified, but at the end of the day, you're also dealing with such iconic characters that I think a lot of us are going to give it some leeway and give it some time to bake after launch without totally just binning it, because they do seem to be trying to do justice to those characters, and I think that they're fairly effective in portraying interesting takes on those characters, at least.
So one final question for me, Pat. If they do end up exploring the comics universe here, and they do end up bringing in folks from the Marvel's first family, Fantastic Four, who would you cast as Galactus, and why is the right answer Simon Templeman?
Oh gosh. Well, I do think that they will bring. I think that will happen, for starters.
I mean,
because
Simon Templeman has done so much work for Crystal Dynamics anyway, so like,
not necessarily even that. That is good casting. I honestly wouldn't have thought of that, but I think that is pretty good. But I do think that they will bring that eventually you'll see, if the game survives long enough. There's a big if there. The main villain of the story that ships with the game is MODOK. So they are definitely not. Oh, they're not. They're doing comic stuff.
They are.
And the premise is that AIM kind of takes over the world and is the world police, which is a good story that rules. Those stories off. It's hard to mess that up when you do that in the comic books, because AIM are good bad guys. To that end, I think that they will absolutely be reaching into cosmic and stuff. And I think that they will have a Fantastic Four blowout at some point, probably around the time that whenever Marvel Films gets that sorted. But casting wise, I don't know if I have. Simon Templeman is a good pull. I could also see them trying to reach into, that is like the amount of voice work you would need for them to maybe reach outside the realm of video game voice actors and try to pull someone in. And I think it would be very funny if
Peter Dinklage.
No, I think it would be very funny. This isn't a real desire. I think Simon Templeman's a better pull, but it would be very funny if they got Josh Brolin to play Galactus, because Josh Brolin played Thanos.
Right.
He also did Darkseid, didn't he? In the event, or in the Justice League?
Couldn't tell you. There's a Justice League movie?
Yeah. I didn't hear about that.
I heard there's one coming out eventually.
What about Keith David?
Oh shit, that would actually be Keith David would be really.
I don't know who they cast for. I gotta look it up. There's a brief moment where you hear Nick Fury in a mission. Their Nick Fury casting's pretty good. I thought, like, he's on video. I was like, that's a good Nick Fury. I like that Nick Fury. Also, Maria Hill is played by, damn it. Maria Hill is very good casting also.
I think their casting and all their actors are pretty good.
I just, in those in particular, now I can't find who it is, so I'll have to chime back in when I find who. But it's a recognizable voice actress.
They do the Assassin's Creed 4 thing after each mission in the beta and say, what did you think of this mission? Rate it 1 to 5. So I wonder if that'll be in the full game, and if they're like, okay, do people like, or if that's just the beta, like, do people like these missions, or do we need to rethink the structure of this game and what we're having people do?
Spoilers, I've been giving them 2s.
Yep.
Anyways,
Is it
I'm sure-
actually?
I'm sure we're going to be hearing lots about this game over the next several months.
I hope so, because that means that it survives long enough that that's possible.
Well,
I mean, Anthem survived over a year before
wonder if
they
it's-
were like, okay, we gotta rework.
It might actually be Kobe Smulders that plays Maria.
What? Really?
Because she was in the Lego games.
Okay.
I gotta do more research on this. I'm having trouble finding who it is, but
she's all right as Hill. So
yeah.
No one has lasted longer than the Avengers game, though.
lots of things.
Well,
But I think you're talking about the Yakuza 2.
Hell yeah, the
Yakuza series.
Yeah, the Yakuza series has been around for a while, and it stood the test of time.
Yeah, and Yakuza 2, a PS2 game, remastered, rebuilt in the Yakuza 6 engine, continues to hold up. So the thing I've played now, this is my fourth Yakuza game. Yeah, so I played 0, then I played 6, then I played 1, Kiwami, and now I'm playing Kiwami 2, which is the extreme remaster of Yakuza 2 from the PS2 days. Set in the same place that all the Yakuza games are set, Kamurocho, which is Kabukicho, their like fake version of it, in Tokyo. And also in Osaka, in Sotenbori, which is their fake version of Dotonbori, which is like the middle of Osaka along the river. And that part was in Yakuza 0. So, yeah, Yakuza 0. That was where you played as Majima. But now it's like 20 years later, whatever, or 10 years. I don't even remember. The timelines on these games are buck wild. I think it's like 20 years, because in Yakuza 1, because Yakuza 1, Kiryu goes to jail for 10 years at the start of the game, and then he gets out in 2005. This is the next year. Lots of wild stuff happened. People are dead. Kiryu's best friends, his family, everyone he's ever known is dead, basically. And he's just like, I'm out of this Yakuza life. And just when he thinks he's out, you'll never guess it, they pull him back in.
What?
It happens to him like 6 times.
It happens to him so many times. He is literally like, I don't want to be a Yakuza anymore. But he is like so honor bound, and like he is part of the problem. But no, I mean, yes, but no. Like the one thing he is smart about is like being a Yakuza and like trying to get shit done in like an effective, safe, non-destructive way. But he's always at odds with like people who are working behind the scenes trying to amass more power. And so Kiryu is like this legendary mythical Yakuza who is basically invincible, like across the country, like everyone's heard of him, yet all these street punks still try and mess with him. Like, you know, you're running down the street and they're like, hey, you, and then you get in a fight and you're like, really? And you're like, okay, I'm going to like suplex you over this guardrail and break your spine. So
to bash your skull with a iron trash can.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up a legit motorcycle,
yes,
and beat you over the head with it, and then jump into the air and like slam it down on you.
I'm gonna just shoot you with a gun.
Yeah, that too. There's the cops never show up. They're always, and when they do, they're not on the streets like for all these mass fights that are happening. Or so part of Yakuza 1 or Kiwami is the Majima Everywhere system, where Kiryu's blood rival Majima is constantly, Majima just wants to fight Kiryu because he's like, he's so good and I just want to fight him, and like that's all I want to do is fight Kiryu. And so he takes it on himself to like surprise Kiryu and make sure he's always on his toes. And so you'll be walking around town and you'll like walk over a manhole, and then suddenly it'll cut to a cutscene of like behind Kiryu, walk over it, and then it lifts up and Majima crawls out of the sewers and is like fighting you. Or you'll be in a fight with just some random guy, and then he comes running up down the street. He's like, I want to get on this. or like jumps out of the back of a car and like all this ridiculous stuff.
God, that sounds like some.
At one point he like
JoJo's
dresses up like
energy.
at one point he dresses up like a zombie and he's got like makeup, and he gets his the people in his branch of the Yakuza to like act like zombies, like they've been infected, and that starts this whole thing with Kiryu, and it's like a zombie movie. It's really ridiculous.
I love these games so much.
Yes, Yakuza 2, Yakuza Kiwami 2, I've probably spent more time in one of the mini games, one of the side activities of the game, which is the Cabaret Grand Prix. I've probably put about 10 hours into the game at this point, and I wouldn't be surprised if like 5 of those were in the Cabaret game, which is the culture in Japan. There's a culture of cabaret clubs where men and women, depending on the club, can go, and they can pay for a host to sit with them and talk and share their time with them. And you pay for very expensive drinks and food as part of this. And it's like very upscale, and they're supposed to like, you know, give you all your attention. And Kiryu, being the excellent person he is walking down the street. He's like, okay, I've got somewhere to be. And then he sees this manager or this guy get poached from this other club. And these women come out like, oh, you're the guy. And you're like, no, who, what? But Kiryu just goes along with it because he's dumb and will do anything you tell him to until he goes like, wait a second.
Kiryu is in some ways the ultimate himbo.
Oh, yes. He is big himbo energy. He is simultaneously the dumbest man and the smartest man alive.
Yes.
You're totally right.
Lots of emotional intelligence in that. Oh guy,
yeah, no.
But...
So that actually plays into the cabaret minigame. So the crux of the minigame is you're managing a cabaret club that is kind of on the outs. They're on their last leg. They've got only like a handful of girls working. They don't have a lot of money. They've lost like all their clientele. And then there's this other like big club group, like the Kanazaki group, is poaching like their workers and their managers and stuff like that. So Kiryu steps in and he's like, all right, I'm going to run this place, and we're going to win the Cabaret Grand Prix, which is a nationwide competition between the cabaret clubs. And there's like, they have like an announcer who is announcing the events, and like, that girl needs help. Oh, the manager's stepping in. And like, excellent work from the manager. He really knows how to help these women. There's like no time at all. And it's all just like acted over the top, especially the announcer. And each girl has their like stats of like, oh, this one likes to talk. This one's a party girl. This one, her love stat is high, or skill. I don't know what skill has to do with anything. But then they've got like their appearance, like, oh, sexy, funny, stuff, elegant, stuff like that. And you're matching up these stats with the patrons who come in, and then they've got like, this one's poor, this one's average, rich, tycoon. And so you like, okay, well, I want to put my good people with like the rich people so they get more money and stuff like that. Yeah. So
sorry.
Please.
No. I mean, I was just gonna say it's ridiculous because when I first heard all of this stuff, I was like, this is horrible. This is awful. When I first was hearing this stuff about Yakuza games from the outside, I was like, why do people like this? And then you play it and it's tonally weird. It's very much on the side of the people doing the work in a way that makes you go like, oh, this whole
thing is about humanizing.
Yeah, this isn't exactly critiquing the industry in the ways that I wish it would, but at the same time, it is not actually objectifying these people as much as you would think. It's actually kind of doing the opposite.
Yeah.
It's just injecting game systems into that in a way that's really interesting.
Yes. So there's always some sort of like dating aspect, because Dotonbori and Kabukicho are both areas with lots of hostess clubs and things like that, snack bars, cabaret clubs, more hardcore establishments. And so as you level up these hostesses, certain ones like the platinum rank ones, you get you get like conversations with them that can also further level them up. And that's where you get like their actual personality. And you have like these 10-minute like conversations with these girls, and it's mostly them talking to you, and Kiryu responds. And this is where like all his emotional intelligence comes out. But he's also like, he's in his 30s, I think, at this point, or like 40s. He must be in his, I don't even know. Anyway, he is getting, he gets weird at times, but like these girls are also playing off him because they're like, oh, he's so dreamy, and like, oh, maybe I have a crush on you. And Kiryu's like, I think there's one point where this girl's, she says, I wish I could find a guy like you because you're so nice and you can eat as much as I do and stuff like that. And Kiryu just goes, one of the things you can say is, I want someone like, or me too. And he like goes on, he's like, I wish I could find a guy like me too. And they're like, well, how can you tease me like that? But that's like the smart answer. Yeah. But you can play him super horny, and like, yeah, but that's not the smart
like that's
way
not canon.
to do it.
That's not canon Kiryu to me. Kiryu is very not horny at all.
Like he is very like, oh, this is scandalous. Like one girl, her sub story is her panties are stolen, but they're not her panties. But she's like, some panties were stolen from my balcony last night, and I feel very like violated. And Kiryu's like, panties. I'll help you. I'll help you find, like, so you can feel safe because I'm your manager. And he's like, what do your panties look like? And she's like, they're not my panties. What do you think? They're my grandmother's panties. She's visiting me. And he says, oh, your grandmother's panties. I see. And or she's like, oh, I take all these pictures of like the owner of the cabaret club because I'm obsessed with her. And he's like, oh, what sort of pictures? It's like, okay, Kiryu.
Right.
But
yeah,
it's
like
you can play him as a complete idiot.
Yeah, he's like a glorified social worker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that is actually very accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, in Yakuza 6, there's a whole mini game around like video chatting with cam girls, and I at first was like, I don't like this, but then you start to play it, and then I mean, respect for the cam girls working out there, but then you start playing it, and it's like he's actually like, I don't think this is okay, and he's like, this is weird.
The chatting and him hunting and pecking.
Yeah, like, and he's like, oh.
Well, you could also play him and like because he's been in like prison at that point, and he's like in his 50s, and he's like totally divorced from like the modern world. He's just like boobies and all these like very basic like
that's
how
true.
are you a functional person? Like one of the first messages you send is just you have to do like a QuickTime mini game to type it in on like the face buttons. And it's just his message is boobies,
but
which is like one of the more lowbrow versions of the stuff they do.
But also the people that he's video chatting with are like actual idol performers in Japan. So there's like, they try to make nods in all of these sort of dating game parts of these games to humanizing that culture in a way that a lot of Japanese media that I've interacted with has failed to do. And so that's why I think it works, because it doesn't feel like you're laughing at the objectification of women. It feels like you are laughing with those sex workers more so than laughing with Kiryu at them, which is why I think it works tonally.
You're laughing at the hunting and pecking, and just like, this is a very stupid message. Why would a human send this?
Yeah. I mean, it almost feels like you're reacting from the perspective of the cam workers that you're chatting with as Kiryu, because it's clear that they are the professionals in this situation, and that they are the ones that are actually like kind of in control of the conversation, the situation. So. And I think that's why that stuff works without being repulsive.
And that stuff seems a little like off, like playing more of like the other games and seeing like Kiryu being extremely emotionally intelligent and like working with these women and helping them through their issues, and seeing like one of the stories is a woman, one of the workers like her friend works at another club, but her mom found out she's working in a cabaret club and is like, no, you have to quit that job right now. You have to leave all those friends behind. You have to come home with me, and we're gonna like leave the city. And then Kiryu is like, okay, I'm gonna like help you, like, you know, I have to beat up some thugs on the street because that's all Kiryu's really good for. And then come with me, we'll go back, and as thanks for me defending you from those thugs, you have to sit with your daughter and her friend, and you're not leaving until all three of you are friends. And then it turns out that the mom was a cabaret hostess when she was young, and she got screwed over by the management and ended up in like super bad debt, and so she doesn't want that to happen to her daughter. And so it's trying to tell all these like complex, nuanced stories, but it also does it in really weird, ridiculous ways. There's another one where this is outside of the cabaret minigame. I got like accosted on the street by some thugs, and it's like, you're not coming this way. I'm like, I'm going this way. You don't know who I am, do you? And you beat him up, and then their like Yakuza boss comes. He's like, I'm sorry, I know who you are. My boys, they're out of line. Come with me to my favorite club. You go to this club, and it's this woman is like treating you like a baby. She's like calling you a baby. She's like, do you want boobs or milk? And I was just like, excuse me? What? I don't understand. She's like, and so something happens, and I can't remember exactly what leads to it, but basically a wall gets knocked over, and you see the Yakuza boss and all his cronies crawling around on the floor in diapers in this like playroom as like women are chasing after them. And then you have to beat all these men in diapers. And Kiryu's like, you can't force your fetish on anybody. And then afterwards, as you leave, all the cronies are out there like, man, thank you. Oh, we don't want to do that either. But what the boss says goes. But hopefully now he'll be a little more receptive to the idea of not everyone shares his kinks.
It's a good series that has its moments of, I don't know about that. There's some colorism stuff in there that is not great in some of the games. So I don't want to just universally praise the game's like social politics, but at the same time, they're pretty good, and they're pretty aware.
You know, and this game is over 10 years old. This is like probably 15-ish years old, I think. And so, you know, if you look at like the politics of when it's coming from, and I don't know how much is updated, like if it's just the same stuff, just updated into a new engine with like some changes to the gameplay or in like map and stuff, like where you can go in and whatnot. I'm not familiar with the original releases of either Kiwami or Kiwami 2, but I'm having a real good time. They actually did a really great quality of life thing where you can buy an upgrade that just lets you see the location of all the sub stories. So you don't have to just run around aimlessly hoping to like trigger something. Mm-hmm. There are like 70 plus stories in these games.
I love that.
Yeah. So Yakuza Kiwami 2, it's on Game Pass. It's real good. Game Pass on PC and console. That was much longer talking about Yakuza than I expected to, actually. But played another game that's hot off the itch.io as of like 3 hours ago. That game is Mixolumia. It's made by, I think, one person in Japan. I think they're American, but they live in Japan, like me. Dave Makes on Twitter and itch.io. And I was struck by this game the first time I saw it like come by in my Twitter feed, and I was like, oh, I like the look of this. And Mixolumia is like if you took Puyo Puyo, rotated it 45 degrees, and then did the audio treatment style implementation of like a Tetris effect.
Oh.
And then maybe mixed it with like a little bit of Luminous. So you've got, because it's like it's like blocks of 4 that are coming down. So that's kind of where the Luminous bit comes in. And so it's got all these familiar elements that are tying together, but they all interact where the blocks interact in like a unique way. And it's basically, it's a new puzzle game. It's not just, oh, I made a Puyo Puyo, but then made it like Puyo Puyo effect with like the music and the way it like comes in and out. It's you're trying to match up 3 colors of a block on a diagonal or a horizontal basis. You can't do vertical because then they're not touching, I guess. But then you can make, if you can line up like Puyo Puyo, if you can line up multiple kind of colors and then break some, and then you can get a chain reaction going into it, which is very satisfying when you can get it. But right now, since it's 3 hours old, I've been able to play for like an hour, and it's like getting your brain to adapt to a new puzzle game is tricky, because you're like, okay, how does this work? There's no tutorial or anything. It's just get in and go and kind of figure out what's going on. And then I'm like, so the first time I was like, I feel like these should be, I've got like 8 blocks connected, but they're connected in like a zigzag pattern, which isn't any good. You've got to get like in a straight line to get them to drop out. But the cool thing, or one of the cool things that contributes to it, is the way the audio is implemented. So it's very much like Tetris Effect, where it's got like multiple layers to the tracks and parts of songs. And as you go and clear blocks, more parts of the song will start to come in. And they call it a dynamic music system. And one of the cool things is you can implement your own music into the game if you want, or sell it. You have to be like smart and know how to do like music stuff, but they've got like documentation on how to create it, like the best practices. Here's like, you want like your intro part, your middle, and your end, and like, okay, you got like the beginning, and then you've got loops, and like, okay, then you end this loop, you go back to the first loop and stuff like that. Like, okay, now you need a JSON file and like Ogg Vorbis, and you put that all together. And so they have said like, we want people to make their own stuff, and you can sell it or you can do whatever to get that in there. So I look forward to seeing what people do with that. Right now, there's just like 3 tracks, 2 by Dave, and then 1 by Josie Breckner, who did like what is it called? I can't remember. It's a summer kind of thing where as like sounds layer on, you get like a thunderstorm and like rain and stuff like that coming through, which is very cool. So it's just like a very relaxing like puzzle game. Like I wish the music was a little more layered, or like there was more to it, I think. But what is there is very nice, and I hope that this like gains traction with creators and gets a lot of cool music stuff.
Yeah, agreed. I shared a link with our chat, and I'm also going to put it in the show notes of a Twitter post from Dave Makes, and you can watch their journey in making the game almost in real time.
Yes,
which is really cool, because they kept continually updating this same post with like updates basically, and for like over the course of a year, you can see it go from prototype to like adding new features to like, oh, now it does like this and that. Yeah. And it's just really
the first post being like, I don't know what this is, but I think it's something.
Yeah. And then it's like you can look at about a year worth of updates from them, and it's cool. I've been keeping an eye on it too, and I think I'll definitely give it a shot. Probably after this recording. It seems really good. And you're right. I would love to see what if a community can rally behind it and what they could possibly add to it, because collaborative stuff like that is great. Like that's what made AudioSurf great and stuff like that, right? So
some of the stuff that Dave shared was like, he was like they were goofing around with various like sound samples, and they did like a goose one where it was the Untitled Goose Game sounds.
That's very funny.
And things like that in different color palettes. Those did not make it into the final game, but that is the kind of stuff that you could do, was just really memey dumb stuff, or really cool hardcore music stuff.
The music is like, I'd seen GIFs of this game, but not I hadn't heard any of the music. The music is that like it's beautiful. It's really intoxicating. I'm gonna play it just to chill out with that for a bit later, I think, because I'm super into that.
And you can go, like, if you don't want to deal with like the pressure of learning how to like play the game and have that pressure of like, oh, I'm going to fail, and then like the music's going to restart. There is like a no fail mode,
Cool.
like right off the bat.
That's
so
great.
You can hang in there to like figure out the systems, how they work and whatnot.
Yeah. And
Cool.
something I really liked when kind of getting videos ready for this particular podcast was seeing that in the settings menu, like you can kind of pick different tile sets and stuff like that.
Yes.
One of them is basically, what was it? Trans rights. And then there was trans rights dark.
That's
which
great.
I thought was very funny.
I haven't looked at the tile sets, but that's really good. Yeah,
like
it's a really nice looking game. Like obviously I draw comparisons to Tetris Effect, but that's mostly in the audio treatment and the way it implements and allows you to play with plays with audio and layers it in. And you do get into the Tetris Effect kind of going with this, where you're just like, I'm in the zone, but
that's not bad though. Tetris Effect is really good.
Yeah. My point is, this is like a 1-person project.
Yeah.
2-person with the audio and stuff, but so don't expect like super high production value, but it looks very nice, and there are a bunch of different like templates and stuff like that. So it's very cool.
Their documentation, I've been looking at it right now. It's actually, as far as like a man page, it's very, very clear. Like this is something that I could like do, like after I got done with my stuff today. Like this is really clear stuff. I am really jazzed about this because like I love the idea of incorporating sound into puzzle. I've always been a huge fan of that. Not just as a success indicator, of course, but also as a way to have folks explore with different conditions of the puzzle and use sound as a cue to suggest different moves within the puzzle. And I've always been enamored of that kind of stuff. And I think with the community, I hope that people rally around this as they have with other itch.io games. So, like Song of the Sojourner and that kind of stuff, where, we get some really nifty community contribution stuff.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
I'm excited about this.
Cool. They have not ruled out the game coming to Steam from what I saw, but they're waiting to see how well it does on itch.io before like moving to any other storefronts. So if you want to go to itch.io, davemakes.itch.io/Mixolumia, then you can get the game. It's $9 right now, but maybe toss a couple more that way for
I literally just did that. So I'm excited to play.
Same.
And I think with that, we're on to
take us to class.
Do it.
I'm very excited about this.
All right.
I was like, yes, it's a light news week, so that Jeff has plenty of time to educate us on, because I don't know anything about your first bullet point here.
I don't know what either of these things are. I mean, I know what one of them is, but not really.
Yeah. So, right. So for those of you just tuning in and wondering, what my credentials are here. So I'm involved in the philosophy field. I'm getting a PhD, finishing up a PhD in philosophy. And I've been an academic for 11 years now. And so usually video games and philosophy, they sort of have an odd relationship. I mean, sometimes they can be really explicit, and sometimes it can just be sort of in the background, kind of informed. Here we have an example of it being a little bit more direct. So Epic Games, this is back in July, actually, July 17th. So there's a little bit of old news, but I wanted to flesh it out a bit. Epic Games, the maker of Fortnite, they have partnered with the Faculty of Philosophy at Moscow State University. This is not a thing that normally happens. Let me just say that. Like, very rarely does anybody in the business world, whether it's entertainment or not, very rarely do they engage. I like the thing that I just put up as my Zoom background here, which is a picture of Disco Elysium's cover art here. That's the closest I can find to actual like textured like engagement with philosophy and certain canons.
Gaming Fyx's 2019 Game of the Year, Disco Elysium.
Oh yeah. So I recently, like, I am resisting the urge to just talk about that.
We can do that too at some point, but
oh yeah, like I have so many feelings about it. They're all good. Well, most of them. But the thing about this partnership is that it's extraordinarily unique, not only from the business end, but also from the academic end, because usually we're not tapped as a resource for video game development at all. And so I kind of dug into it. I'm like, well, why? Why are you asking philosophers to help with a video game? And both through the work of like Justin Weinberg over at the Daily News, and just digging myself, the Alexei Savchenko, who is a licensing manager for Epic, has released the statement. Through ongoing dialogue, it became apparent that we were aligned with the goals of MSU and its faculty. The Faculty of Philosophy has been participating in similar conversations in fields of simulation and virtual reality at the international scene with close-spirited fellow researchers. I also believe that philosophy is much closer to game development than most may think, and games themselves can be a perfect instrument to explore philosophical thought. Okay, so I'm going to break down because there's a couple of code words there that end up getting glossed over by a lot of media, and that's not because, though they're bad media or something like that. It's just this is really inside baseball. So when he's talking about fields of simulation and virtual reality, in philosophy, what he's specifically referring to is the discipline of the computational theory of mind as it's realized through artificial intelligence researchers of asking the questions, can we make an AI that qualifies as a mind? And this may seem like a very highfalutin question. It absolutely is. But this kind of bringing in AI research that from the computational theories of mind and the vast amount of literature that's been generated in the past 10 years, especially from like informal logic, it makes sense if Epic Games wants to bring in that kind of expertise to see if they can, create a better AI, as it were. The kind of collaboration between philosophy and video game development, though, I think shouldn't just stop at AI, and we really need to be extremely critical of how AI works, especially within mass user experiences.
Sorry, for clarity, when you're saying AI, do you mean AI as a concept of programming, or do you mean AI within actual games, like opposing forces, essentially, or?
Yeah, so thank you for that clarification. So I'm referring to the concept, sort of the back end. I'm not referring to the AI as in the behavior of certain, models or bosses or whatever. So we're thinking about the particular algorithmic back end here that tends to go into AI constructs. And this is all very, high level crunchy and that kind of thing. But this is something that has got a little play, I think, a year ago, 2 years ago, when folks like Ocasio-Cortez brought up the idea of algorithmic bias. So when we're thinking about AI and algorithms and user tracking and things like that, we need to be very, very cautious. And bringing in philosophers can both be a really good idea because a lot of us are very concerned about AI ethics. And in fact, we really wish we were involved in the kinds of discussions with this, because a lot of folks tend to err on the Elon Musk side of things, which is to say, oh, make it an AI, it's going to save us all, it'll be fine. And it's like, no. And so when we have these sorts of critiques about what kinds of minds we're building, what kinds of inputs we're giving these particular algorithms, we need to also be wary when we're thinking about something that has a really wide market like Fortnite. I mean, I'm not saying that, Fortnite's going to be the harbinger or of our destruction or anything like that. But I would encourage a lot of devs to really take seriously not just the kinds of AI research that agrees with their mission statement. I would definitely encourage that maybe if we're going to think about computational theory of mind within the limitations of the actual construct of the model, rather than, what the buzzwords say. It's like, oh, it's AI, it's free of human bias. No, it's not, unless you're doing completely mathematical things. And even then, that's a little bit of a stretch. And if people want like cited sources here, I can always provide them, through email, and I can send them way more literature than anyone really ever wants to read. But so, and I would also actually recommend, before I continue, there's a Twitter, Dr. Jonathan Flowers. He's an excellent critical tech philosopher. He is also a Japanese philosopher, a philosopher of aesthetics. So at Shengokai, Shengokai. Definitely give him a follow if this kind of thing interests you. So yeah, should we be worried, or should we not be worried, or should we just ignore it? Is this sort of, blip news? Speaking as someone involved in the field, I would say it's signs of things to come, because when you get philosophers underwriting something, it tends to do things because this is a broader disciplinary point, but a lot of the social power, as ironic as it may seem, a lot of the social power within the humanities tends to fall in philosophy, because we tend to be in every discipline. We tend to have our fingers in every pie, and everyone gets annoyed by us, and we annoy ourselves, and it's a whole thing. So when we're thinking about, especially Moscow State University's specific approach to artificial intelligence, to their specific approach to computational theory of mind, and what that might mean for Epic Games and what that might mean for game development, I have my hopes, and my hopes are we get much more responsive, enriching experiences that aren't just AIs of antagonism. What would it look like to have an actual AI that can adapt to not necessarily procedural generation, but at least can adapt to more cooperative forms of play? I think that would be interesting. In fact, a little bit more challenging, versus, the sort of bleak picture, and the bleak picture being that, well, now we have a really nice way to sort through data scraping. Even more than we have now. And like that's the thing that I'm concerned about, especially with something like Epic Games, because I don't have a lot of charity for them, but maybe I'm just jaded.
They have a weird way of presenting. They have a weird way of like humanizing themselves. Like, Tim Sweeney is very accessible, like you can tweet at him and there's a decent chance you'll get a response, which is odd, and that's true of a lot of people that I've seen who work there. If you find them, they're usually pretty happy to talk about work stuff with random people on social media, but at the same time the answers aren't always very satisfactory. So it's like, it's a tough, I'm with you. And also it almost seems like, I hope that there are folks like with your skill set and knowledge base that are providing feedback to them, because even though they don't seem like they're soliciting it, I feel like they are more likely to at least read it than a lot of big multi-million and billion-dollar entertainment companies. So
right, and that kind of gets to the other prong of this, which is, if you're a member of the discipline, that what I'm about to say is utterly unsurprising. And for those of you outside the discipline, it doesn't mean that you've been hiding under a rock. It's that we just operate in weird circles.
Yeah.
Is that philosophy as a discipline is really not in a good place right now. Like it's really being torn apart, mainly due to a lot of trans exclusive radical feminists and general critical people, who are really just pulling a whole thing on it, and they're getting a lot of backing from a lot of the old names, and it's very, very problematic. And so when I'm thinking about this sort of, what does it mean for AAA devs or for these billion-dollar companies to come to philosophy, I could very easily see them coming to philosophy for a kind of echo chamber effect, to seek out the, I'm gonna do this to myself, and I'm gonna end up getting tweeted at for forever. They're seeking out the Brian Leiters of the world. Brian Leiter, for those of you outside of philosophy, he's like the Donald Trump of philosophy. He's infamous. Yeah, he's bad, and just saying, it's like saying the name of Beetlejuice. Like, you don't want to do it out loud.
What have you done to our podcast?
Oh, right. You're about to get so many new listens, and I'm so sorry.
That's fine. I'll fight them all. It's probably not good for my mental health to do so, but I'll do it.
I'll be there with you.
I'll take the keys to the Twitter, Alex.
Right. So, but there's this whole swath of people, and they tend to be in philosophy of mind, interestingly, and ethics. You'd think the ethicists would be better, but they're not. And so, like, when you have these sorts of disciplines, it's like, but you could be talking to other sections of what's happening, other sections of the discipline of what's currently happening, and creating more textured games, which leads me back to Disco Elysium, because I think Disco Elysium is a really good example of what happens when you successfully integrate the better parts of philosophical critique and method into a really enrapturing story in a really interesting package, and you get something there that's really special for people. Because instead of, sitting here and creating a better data scraping AI, what you're doing is you're asking crunchy questions and having the player deal with that in certain ways that can enable not just a kind of critical awareness of what's happening, but also what's your position in the world. You're constantly trying to find your position in the world as that walking disaster of a detective. Yeah. And, and I think that kind of positioning can really benefit. Like, I keep imagining what would have happened. And of course, this would, from the developer standpoint, and like, I realize what I'm saying, Alex, is like such a huge ask, and it would be like, oh no, don't do this. Don't do this to game developers.
No, I have thoughts, but I'm going to wait until after.
But basically, like, thinking of something like, what if a Mass Effect? What if a Dragon Age? What if one of these big choice-bound RPGs, had that kind of flexibility that you see in Disco Elysium? Yes, we can critique Disco Elysium because everything comes back to that same ending. But the way that you get there, the sort of procedure of getting there, is, I think, heterogeneous enough different enough to sort of invest you in the story in very special ways. So anyway, you had thoughts, Alex, and I'm interested to hear them.
Yeah. No, just thinking about what you're saying and the fact that philosophers and philosophy as a field should work hand in hand with development is something I actually do agree with, because I do work with AI at work. Like we can talk about and it should be noted, I don't work in game development anymore. The AI I work with is more akin to like if you're on Spotify and what music it recommends to you based on what you listen to. Like that's the kind of AI we work with. And oftentimes when we're in the weeds of it, like I can throw out some $1 million words for you, like the simple stuff like determining frontiers with depth first search or breadth first search and using heuristic functions, or all the way to like stochastic gradient descent in multi-layer neural network kind of bullshit. Like we can talk about that. Like we can talk the technical details and I'm fine with it. But we as programmers and coders often only look at it in those very mathematical, heuristics, right? Like we're only thinking of it in those very specific ways, and we often don't consider the human element. Like we're thinking about how can we optimize our find paths and our searches and our explorations and stuff like that so that it works efficiently, and we don't often consider the ethical parts. Like ethics is a course that we do have to take in computer science courses, because eventually you do get there. But like the things we more care about are search algorithms and uncertainty, like how you account for uncertainty, optimization, and like language. Like if you're building Google Translate and stuff like that, like you need to figure that stuff out, but you're not thinking about the ethics behind it. And I think you're totally right that it is a good move for AI, both in the back end sense of a store, like an Epic store, or a Google Translate or a Spotify or any of those, as well as within game design, like you're saying. So I think it is a valuable conversation to have. And if anyone pokes either or both of us about having a more technically in-depth conversation about these topics, that's something I would totally be in for. And I could maybe invite a couple of my mathematical PhD friends to be involved as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things that, like, when we're thinking about mind, and like I'm gonna try to keep this as short as possible, because I know philosophers can be really long-winded, because oh my god. But when we're thinking about mind, especially with what we demarcate as intelligence and what users will recognize as mind, very frequently we're going to fall into these particular categories, and these categories are not bestowed to us by some natural font of inevitable knowledge, right? They're actually historically contingent, and because there's a historical contingency to the recognition of mind, even if mind is itself a completely emergent natural phenomenon that's going to look the same no matter what place and time you're at, which is a dubious claim, but again, it's a whole other thing. But like, if we at least talk about the recognition of mind, I think that even introducing that into the artificial intelligence discussion, and introducing that into the idea of what can qualify as artificial intelligence and what doesn't qualify, and what can be optimized and what counts as optimization, I think those kinds of conversations are really like integral to how we proceed, especially with like the weird position we're at in gaming, because I keep hearing it everywhere, every big, I hear it at Waypoint, I heard it here, I heard it over at Abnormal Mapping, where we're all kind of looking at the PS5 in the mini fridge and, and just kind of going, where's the leap? That it doesn't feel like, it feels like, okay, it's a new box. We have a very significant thing, and we have the SDK is going to be really interesting. Maybe there'll be more flexibility, and perhaps. But ultimately, when we're watching, the PS4 kind of trailers, the big showcase, we're just sort of like, well, the loading on what was it, Jack and Dexter, the instant loading. That's a cool.
Excuse you,
Ratchet and Clank.
Excuse you.
Sorry, Ratchet and Clank. I totally messed it up. That's my bad. I'm sorry. So
I think it's better this way.
Clearly that I'm being an old man at the moment, and we'll get to the old man topic in just a second because that's the next one. But yeah, so like, you know, obviously, like, I am amazed just from a technical craft standpoint. I'm like, wow, look at that instantaneous loading. That's a really cool trick. But what kind of experiences can we craft with that instantaneous loading besides just environment generation? So like, what can we do with this? And having those conversations, I think we should involve philosophers, with a little asterisk, some philosophers, in those kinds of discussions, because I think it really does matter, because it's one of those things that ultimately can help people understand what qualifies as a mind and what wouldn't qualify as a mind, and maybe those boundaries are more fuzzy than we think.
Yeah.
And somewhere there's like, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, one way to consider it, like if you want to get, if we want to kind of reframe how that new SSD works, and how as something as what sounds trivial as better loading times can actually completely influence design, is a way, like, here's an analogy, or not even an analogy, just a point to draw from. Think about arcade cabinets and the development of arcade games. And you had a budget. As a developer, you had $100,000, whatever. 90% of your budget was going towards hardware, because CRTs are expensive, boards are expensive, like storage of media was expensive. 16 megabytes back then was a lot. And like, so 10% of your budget was going to the actual development. So now you get to home consoles, cartridges, still expensive. So like, that's probably 50% of your budget now, right? Et cetera, et cetera. You can extrapolate that all the way up to now with Blu-ray discs and eventually digital distribution, where like all of your budget is going towards development and not so much the media, or like the medium rather, which is carrying the code. And you can think of that kind of trajectory in much the same way the development works, because it used to be that you had long elevator rides to mask loading because you had to, because if you want it to look good, you want that stuff in memory, and you have to wait for it, because that's just a limitation of the hardware and the software and the code and everything. Now, we are at the point where we're away from arcade games. We're more towards our Blu-ray discs by having this SSD, because we don't have to wait for those loads anymore. It's not as expensive on the resources. So we have all of this budget that we can have that's now free to do other stuff. What do we do with it? We don't have to worry about how long it takes to load stuff. We don't have to wrap up our system I/O, which is input output. That's loading textures into memory or whatever, sound, etc. We can worry about having a neural network, having AI over top, which is kind of directing the experience. And yeah, I think is that kind of an apt way to draw another or analogy or reframe it for you, Jeff?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sort of thinking laterally, you know, where something has kind of like an effect, like a not a unrelated effect, but like a sort of cascade effect, where you're just sort of like, oh, this thing is obviously connected to things like budget. Yeah, like I think that's a really good example of it. And like again, there's a much crunchier conversation here to be had about epistemology. Which I am again resisting, but it's very. I think that the move towards using philosophers to influence video games and especially the video game development, rather than just like the New Vegas shout out of Hegel.
I think that kind of speaks to the thing that I keep coming back to, listening to both of you talk about the involving philosophers in the conversation for the progression of the sort of technical aspects of game development. And I think that almost a higher priority to me is for that to take place in the process of narrative design and development, because we're talking about a medium, and this is going to sound really harsh, and I don't want to I get it. And also, I was just talking about how I'm excited for the story in the Avengers, which is probably going to be pretty shallow. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that there's not room for all kinds of stories and media, but you're talking about a medium where a lot of people who are big fans of it think that Deus Ex is like the revelatory text, or that BioShock is the revelatory text. And I love those games, but the only game that I have ever played that made me think from a philosophical perspective ever is Disco Elysium. And that's problematic to me. And I think that there have been games that grasp at that same level of quality when it comes from a moment to moment writing perspective. We just talked about Necro Barista last week. And certainly that is a game that is not attempting to approach the same kind of philosophical topics, and that it shouldn't be. It should if they wanted to, but it doesn't need to, is what I'm saying. That game is wonderful, and to me, a 5-star game that doesn't need to dive into that. So I'm not saying all games should do that, but with respect to Warren Spector and the writing team on Deus Ex, and with respect to the fact that that was a long time ago, that's not deep. And I think we still have some kind of sacred cows in the gaming world that it's hard for us to step back and go this isn't good. It is above average for the bar that video games set, but you can be more critical of it than I think we're kind of willing to, because nobody wants to be the hand grenade in the room that says Deus Ex could be better. And I think that sometimes is sets back sort of the critical conversation around how do we encourage the improvement of narrative design in games that want to be a Deus Ex or a BioShock or a Disco Elysium, which I think does it largely successfully. So
I think that's 100% valid, but I also think you do have to kind of bear in mind that Deus Ex was literally 20 years ago. I think it came out in 2000. And when it came to narrative design in games, you did have stuff that was starting to trend towards that. Especially if you get into old ass adventure games, because those are the ones that were more narrative focused and actually cared about writing more so than you got Half-Life that tried, but it wasn't going for anything philosophical really. It was just a sci-fi story.
Yeah.
And you got your System Shocks, etc., which were kind of falling down the same rabbit holes. But those, while by 2020 standards are not particularly deep, and they were doing a lot of things across a breadth of systems, I guess. Deus Ex, yes, it does have. It is trying to be a little bit deep, I guess, by the standards of the time. But it's also about the fact that you can approach these mission designs with however you want to,
which is great.
Yeah,
and that's why I love it.
Yeah, and I think it influenced a lot of stuff that came after. Much like I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna invoke the word. Much like how Citizen Kane moved movies from simple entertainment and talkies, whatever. And I'm not saying you should draw the direct comparison, but there are benchmark films or benchmark books or however you want to approach it that say this kind of changed what our standard is and what our standard should be. And from there, we were able to iteratively get better. And I think that's kind of how I see Deus Ex. I don't see it in 2020 stuff and seeing this philosophy is kind of garbage by our standards.
No, that's not even necessarily. I think the issue that I have with the reason that I bring it up is it was 20 years ago, but Citizen Kane existed significantly before it. And there are texts I think from a game design perspective, Deus Ex was hugely innovative, and that's why I like it so much. I'm speaking more particularly from like the fiction, that it's the prose of the story. It's not necessarily, it's drawing from a lot of references from other works, and it's not considering like a lot of those philosophical elements. And there's no reason that it couldn't have then. Like, I don't think that 20 years of advancement in game design necessarily matters when it comes to the prose and the narrative so much, which is more the thing that I'm saying. It's okay to be critical of with some of those. It's okay to say, yes, it was 20 years ago, but also we've had these texts for a long time, and we could have that education has existed. I mean, if you hand someone works today to say, here's a way to maybe look at your narrative design from a more philosophical perspective, at least half of them would likely, you'd be able to say better than me, Jeff, but at least half of them would likely be from more than 20 years ago. So that's more what I'm getting at. I think less games as a whole, because I think as a whole, yes, there's of course like a lot of development, and I wouldn't want to, I'm not really seeking to like criticize the level design, for example, in Deus Ex, or the systems design, but more from a narrative perspective.
I think there's room for philosophy to influence on all of that stuff, on level design, on systems design, yes, because the narrative is such like a small part of what a game can be.
Yes.
Yeah.
And those are the areas where I think iteration and development will take more time too. So I certainly recognize that from that perspective. It's absolutely a thing that the medium has to build.
Yeah. And like
one thing.
Oh, sorry. Go for it, Jeff.
Go ahead. All I was going to say is that one thing that might be helpful, because there's a couple of distinctions that might be useful for this conversation, is that from what I hear Pat doing is talking about actually a community attitude or a community interpretation of a a notable work in game design and game narrative. I mean, for many, and this is just born from experience on the 4chan boards. And yeah, I went through that phase.
A true philosopher.
Oh God. Right, let me go get my puke bucket. But there are people who are very much like, that they never went past, they because it spoke directly to a kind of very classically Western conspiracy politic where it confirms the idea that, wow, there's something institutional and structural going on, but we are not going to really start critiquing power. Instead, we're just going to sort of invent this whole trilateral commission stuff, and the Illuminati and, Knights Templar and stuff. And I think that the community engagement with those titles needs to be distinguished from the quality of the title itself, because I'm ending up agreeing with both of you, but I'm also interpreting both of you and making different points. Because Alex is right, when we're thinking about because I remember when Deus Ex came out, and I literally stayed up for 3 days straight playing that. Like, I literally missed a paying gig because I was playing Deus Ex.
And I agree with Alex too, to be clear. My point wasn't necessarily meant in argument as much.
Likewise, I don't disagree with Pat either.
Yeah.
So like when we're thinking about community engagement, when we're thinking about the kinds of ways that especially the gaming community treats certain titles or certain intellectual properties, I can totally sympathize with someone like D.L. Lucina, who just says, why don't you guys just read a book, please?
In so many words, I'm kind of sort of saying that.
Well, they did read a book and they made the best game ever. EA did it. Visceral did it. It's Dante's Inferno.
Oh no.
No, they read a book and the game will be revealed, I don't know, sometime in the near future. They read 7 books and it'll come out, I don't know, next year maybe.
Oh no.
Anyway, sorry, please continue.
that is still like not the worst case scenario for me, because what I'm afraid of, like legitimately afraid of, is that one day I'm gonna wake up and like, I don't know, some developer, some AAA developer, Blizzard Activision will have on their Twitter, it'll just be a black box with white text, and all it will say is, "Who is John Galt?"
Oh.
And I will jump out a window.
That's the monkey's paw in this situation, is me saying developers should read more philosophy, and then it turns out that they're just like, yes, let's literally interpret this book. God is in fact dead, and let's make a game about it.
I would prefer Nietzsche. We had Xenosaga. That's Nietzsche as hell.
That's true. That actually has been done already, but in more eloquent ways.
Anyway, so that's a worthwhile conversation.
And it's when it's who's John Galt, and then below it has like the shrugging emoji face.
Too perfect. It's unholy.
Yeah.
I hate everything about it.
Yeah.
So speaking of things I get grumpy about, I'll move on to the second point, because we've been running for a while. So there's this game that's coming out for the mini fridge. At least, or is it? No, it's PS4, or is it mini fridge? I can't remember.
Yeah.
It's mini fridge. Okay,
it's mini fridge and whatever refrigerator you happen to might
PC,
have under your desk.
Is that really not going to come to the PS5?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah,
That's so wild.
So there's Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis. Oy.
They're making a new Genesis?
I wish.
well, it is Sega.
There's another new console.
It is Sega.
I mean, it is Sega. Yeah.
This is a Trojan horse.
Remember, there were all those rumors that like Sega was going to sell the Series X in Japan, but and be the Sega Series X, but no, it's going to be the new Genesis.
NG.
It is coming to PS4.
Oh, okay, great. So Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis. And the PSO series has enjoyed quite a bit of success. PSO 2, of course, infamously never came to the States, and a lot of PSO fans have clamored for PSO 2 to be released over here. And I completely understand, and I will preface this by any PSO fans out there. I live with one, in fact. I respect you, I affirm you, I value you. I am happy that this is really good news. Even at the same time, while I'm disturbed by the character creation models who are just so sweaty, oily,
and inhuman.
It's just real. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, but adult cool is pretty cool.
Yeah, adult cool is pretty cool. So yeah. So why am I bringing up Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis? Well, I think one of the things that I want to encourage people as they engage with the Phantasy Star series is to take the time. In fact, on the PS4 now, there's the Sega Genesis collection, and they keep releasing it for every freaking new system. And it's really cheap, and it has a whole bunch of old Genesis games. The reason why I recommend that is because it has Phantasy Star 2, Phantasy Star 3, and Phantasy Star 4 included. One of the things on why I would encourage players to engage with that material is because Phantasy Star Online, just through the conventions of the medium of being an MMO. I mean, yes, it does have an offline single player mode where you can experience the story and get a little bit more crunchy, but ultimately it's mechanically an MMO. And when you have a persistent player base, you're not going to get certain narrative functions. They're just going to be closed off to you until we make another sort of creative decision. But most folks want to play it safe. This turns out to be a problem, I would advance, for Phantasy Star. And the reason why is because the Phantasy Star series from the get-go has been a series that has been characterized by grief. Grief is the biggest driver of plot in those games. And they did things that were extraordinarily ahead of their time for JRPGs. I should index that, including sort of my generation's version of Aerith. You know, the big Aerith thing, where the person you think is the protagonist for the first 20 hours of the game in Phantasy Star 4 suddenly isn't anymore. And it's handled with an emotional maturity that you really don't see. Likewise, there's a kind of persistence, a kind of when we're thinking about the events of the world, they're not merely the satisfaction of quests and the quests become unavailable and the circumstances remain static. Rather, things have weight. And some of the best RPG experiences, I'm thinking of, Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy VII, Xenogears, Xenosaga, things like that. The Tales of series, from what I've experienced of it. When events happen, they matter. And because they matter, they have a certain kind of way to communicate emotional weight. Sorry, my ventilation kicked on, and so I'm like trying to adjust my noise gate very quickly. It's like, so when I'm talking about the Phantasy Star series, I really want to encourage people, rather than getting sucked into Phantasy Star Online 2 and saying, oh, that's the best Phantasy Star ever, to really go back to the old games, because what made those games beautiful was death, was loss, was heartbreak, and the return of such. And when watching these characters actually grow, and not just be like, well, I'm an anime character and therefore I'm just going to stab a thing and that I'll feel better because my power level went up. Yes. Mm-hmm. It's, it's not, the Dragon Ball sort of emotional content here. And I think
be careful, Andre might show his nipples.
What?
We'll get back to that.
Don't worry, continue. I'll explain that later.
Just
move along.
So when we're thinking about especially new players, the Phantasy Star universe is a really rich universe, and I think it has a lot to offer. But I think that if we're separating Phantasy Star from what has characterized the early games as being classic, which is to say persistence, permanence, death, grief, trauma, and not just trauma for the sake of trauma, but trauma as in like working out through loss and finding new bonds and finding ways to grow and not just turning grimdark. I think there could be something there, and maybe we can push, or even if we can't push, we can at least start to pay more attention to the ways that RPG experiences can be informed by, rather than just sort of the affirmation of the monarchy, which is what YouTube typically get in JRPGs. You can get something that's a little bit more human-centered, and that kind of thing. Anyway, that's what that was my surprisingly less grumpy rant than I expected.
I've not ever played a single Phantasy Star game at all, and have kind of always been interested in it, but I don't really know if the best option is to just play the first one and then go on from there, or if
they're pretty disconnected. Like Phantasy Star 4 takes takes place like 1,000 years later from the previous. I think either 1,000 years after 2 or 3. I can't remember. That's the one with Chaz, right, Jeff?
Yeah, that's the one with Chaz.
Yeah,
it's difficult to get Phantasy Star 1.
Yes.
By legal means. And I may perhaps find some way to experience those games, that first game, and feel better about it by paying the $1 a piece that it costs to purchase 2, 3, and 4 on Steam, which tells me that perhaps Sega is not that concerned with people accessing those titles.
Yeah,
exactly.
But it's interesting, Jeff, that you're saying all this, because I think the same journey you're talking about with regards to grief and loss and, you know, the flow of Phantasy Star 4 especially, is you can map a lot of that onto The Last of Us 2, because there is a lot of parallels that one can draw in terms of character development and how they go from, and how their actions are informed by the experiences they go through.
Perhaps I will not be playing Phantasy Star.
But I would say you said the way they approach it is not in the grimdark way. So I think that's where the difference lies, probably. And where Pat would probably feel a little bit more at ease with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Pat, if you're looking for a good entry point, I know this sounds very counterintuitive. Give 4 a try, because 4 is, I know.
I made a face.
I know. I feel that, like, no, you got to start at 1. But the thing is that the mechanics of the game itself are, especially with classic Phantasy Star, it's good. They arguably find their best realization in 4, and at least it'll sort of teach you how to appreciate it, and so that way when you do play like 1, 2, and 3, it'll be like, oh, it's a Phantasy Star game. Okay, I get it.
Honestly, the way I tend to enjoy when I go back and look at you know, classics or non-classics, just older games, I tend to appreciate seeing the mechanical development. That's why usually I play games from, like most people, there's certainly a part of it that's like, oh, I got to play it from the beginning of the story. But for me, it's actually largely because I think the storytelling that happens from a design and mechanical evolution perspective is really interesting to me. So, so I might even try looking at 4 briefly and then rewinding and then coming back to it to play through it.
Because one of the things that happens with 4, because Alex is right, they're pretty disconnected in time, but they are not disconnected in character. Because one of the things I played 4 first, and then I went back and played 1, 2, and 3, and then oh my God, Alex. So Alex has as a Zoom background now who is John Galt, and it's my nightmare.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, you can't see the full image.
That's okay. So, but the thing about 4, which is interesting, is it is very much diving into the Nichian thing of eternal return. So you'll get a kind of reincarnation story, and that if you do play it chronologically, that will hit like a ton of bricks because of what happens in the previous games. And you're like, oh. Well,
unfortunately, okay. I won't be playing any more games in 2020 because that is absolutely a way to sell me on throwing 400 hours of my life away.
And you know, I'm not going to look down on you, and no one should look down on you if you end up using like any kind of speed ups or anything like that, because I'll just say from a mechanics standpoint, the encounter rate in Phantasy Star is bonkers. It is absolutely bonkers. So just like, you know, if you need to just save state or use the rewind feature in the Sega Genesis collection on the PS4, that's perfectly fine, and no one should shame you for it because the encounter rate is bonkers.
Yeah, I do enjoy hard JRPG. Not that that has anything to do with difficulty, but I do enjoy hard JRPGs. So if it has that, then
well, that's all the hottest news on Sega's newest Genesis, coming later this year, 2020. No, coming next year, 2021.
I did want to say that while it sounds from someone who hasn't engaged with any of them that it is a better play to go back and play the classics. Everyone should watch the explanation video that they put out for New Genesis, because it is like a wild puzzle box of like explaining what that thing is. And it's like the number of infographics and data sets that come up on screen during that trailer, it's hilarious. I was like on my toes the whole time. It was like a narrative. I was like, well, what is it? Is it an expansion? Is it a new game? It's an expansion and a new game, and everything goes back and forth. It's very funny. I don't think I'm ever going to play it, but it was very entertaining to watch the video.
All right. Well, that is going to bring us to news. Thank you, Jeff, for
thank you.
elevating the discourse this week and bringing in a whole new perspective that we don't often get.
It's much better than our first episode where we were literally talking about poop for the first at least 30 minutes.
Hey, you're the one who brought a dump in the dark.
That was the first game we talked about. Anyways.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
We brought it back for this episode with the Avengers.
That's too much. That's too mean.
Yeah, you're right. A dump in the dark isn't that bad.
Yeah. All right. What we got, Andre?
We have today.
Speaking of dumps in the dark,
we've got. I didn't watch it, but the state of play seemed like it was all right. I mean, it had some interesting news. We've got. Oh, where'd it go? Did I lose it? There it is. The Crash Bandicoot 4, whatever. That looks like a Crash Bandicoot game. Hitman Trilogy. Playable in PSVR.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. I don't know how that would work.
I don't throw the cans of spaghetti with 1-to-1 fidelity.
Yeah, that's it's only on PSVR as far as I know. There's no PC support. Okay.
There is a video I'm gonna have to recommend to all of you to watch. This is separate. I'll put it in as a link note. Called "The Intimacy of Everyday Objects." It is a video from the YouTube channel of Jacob Geller, and it is extremely good. He talks about ropography and stuff like that, being like, trivial objects, small things, and just like how Half-Life Alyx has the bottles of beer or wine that you can like turn around with your hand and you can see the liquid moving, and how that elevates things, and just like how that makes things feel more intimate. And I feel like if Hitman can make that can of spaghetti feel like something that actually has weight and is like you can shake it around and you can hear like I'm in.
Yeah.
But for real, that video is really good. I'll put a link to it in the show notes.
Yeah. All right. Next up, Braid Anniversary Edition. Speaking of philosophy and not great people,
the wrong direction to go with philosophy in video games.
The conclusion of that game, though.
I never played. It was Xbox exclusive, right? I don't know if it ever came out. Did it come out on PC? Okay, I never played it, but
it's like if there was a twist in Frog Fractions and you were like, oh.
I think I know what it is. But yeah. How about a good indie game, Spelunky 2, coming later this year?
I don't know if it's good yet. Spelunky was good.
Yeah. I trust Derek what's his name now? Derek Yu. Thank you. I trust Derek Yu.
Coming next month. I believe they said it was delayed at some point, but now it's coming out September 15th. Let's see, Star Wars Vader Immortal. They're weird, like kind of a show, isn't it?
It's not very good. It's actually more like a walking simulator, a VR walking simulator.
Yeah.
As someone who loves walking simulators, it's not very good. It has no bearing on anything Star Wars at all, really, other than Darth Vader's there, but then you go underground and there's a weird like society under the earth that you're their chosen one or whatever, and they're
so it's Rise of Skywalker.
It's on par with Rise of Skywalker, I would say, in its level of quality.
Well, saving us from that is Control, the Alan Wake expansion.
I want to play that game again on PC to play those expansions.
I am is this the last DLC? I don't know. I'm waiting for it all to be out to play it.
Yeah.
Let's see. We got Temtem coming to PS5 next year.
Yep. Temtem's good.
It is.
Yeah. I wonder if that's going to be like, oh, it's an early access thing, or if it just be like, here's the game. Because they've done like some early access stuff, but not.
I think they're targeting release for that out of early access for 1.0.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd imagine
it's gonna have
1.0.
It's supposed to have crossplay as well when it hits. So.
Oh, interesting. That's cool.
Yeah. I don't know. That wasn't tied to the PS5 announcement. They have said in the past that it will have crossplay when they hit 1.0, as if they can do it, and they have said that they don't see any reason they can't do it. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Hood Outlaws and Legends, which I guess is like a Robin Hood thing. It's a 4v4 multiplayer heist game.
Whatever.
Okay. Do you play as like a Fox version of Robin Hood?
No, maybe there's skins. It's 4v4, so I assume it's a service game. Maybe you can get like a skin.
If it's vaguely medieval themed multiplayer game, it'll be overrun by white supremacists within a month of release, so you won't want to play it.
But
Hard truths.
But if it's the Disney version, I'm in, because that's the best version of Robin Hood.
Yes.
What if it was Robin Hood Men in Tights?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Okay, but playing it relatively straight to the original material.
Depends on, that's a matter of perspective.
Yeah. Anyways,
I mean, like, I really enjoy the Disney version too.
It is.
And
It's
like,
great. It's really good.
If the Disney version is going to be the thing, I want there to be a 4v4 chorus mode, so you can all sing the damn song together.
There we go.
yeah, the slowed down version of the hamster dance, of course.
Well, speaking of things everybody wants to sing, Bug Snacks got a gameplay trailer.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting it to be a first-person game. For some reason.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the Octodad wasn't first person, but it's like, I want to say Pokemon Snap-esque, but you're not on like rails, but you're going around this island. You do take some pictures occasionally. It's like some Viva Pinata vibes, kind of.
Umarangi Generation, but with Bug Snacks.
Umarangi Generation is significantly more I don't know. It's not like Bug Snacks, I can tell you that.
So yeah, it looks like a game.
Yeah.
It's a game.
I still want to play that. Holiday this year. Still no official date. I wonder if that's like launch with the PS5 or what. I don't know. We'll see. Some Godfall stuff. The Pathless. I don't know what that is.
Godfall had a very this sounds really mean, and you know what, it kind of is. People are working hard at that game. Yes, it had a like pathetic FAQ.
Is this like Dark Souls?
Counterplay Games is aiming to innovate with Godfall to provide a fresh take on action RPGs by rewarding skill-based defensive gameplay and making every hit matter. Is this like Diablo? Godfall is a third-person melee RPG and is not a top-down isometric game. Why even put the questions in there if you don't want to answer them? It's your FAQ. Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on.
Let's see. The Pathless. I don't know what that is. I think one of the interesting, there are two things here. One is Anno Mutationem. I thought Anno was like a city builder. This doesn't look like a city builder.
Like you're in the city.
It looks like an anime game.
It's not related to Anno.
Yeah, I don't think
Anno
it's related to Anno.
It has nothing to do with.
I know, yeah, which is the thing that confused me.
Yeah.
But Aeon Must Die is a fighting game, I believe. And there was some scuttlebutt around this game where the developer team got like fired basically last week,
right,
and they're like showing off this game and not compensated for the work they've done.
I don't think it's that they were fired. I think it's that a lot of them left because they were not getting compensated. Like
maybe that's it.
Like there was crunch going on and like a lot of work going in, and they were not getting paid for like the past several months, so they just left. So
yeah, And then they're here showing off this game.
Weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that
it's-
Sony has to be aware of that. Like, I think that depends on how open the developers are, like, about that stuff.
Well, the people have been like, trying to communicate with like the publisher and stuff like that to, but they've not been very responsive, I guess, is what it sounds like. It sounds like a mess.
Yeah.
We got some like RPGs. The Pedestrian Auto Chess is coming to PS4, PS5.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you want an auto chess game on console, they'll have you covered. Probably long after the auto chess craze has died down. I'm surprised there wasn't an auto chess on console already, but so yeah, that kind of the state of play. No major PS5 news. They said as much beforehand, and people were like, "Why not?" But I believe they have said there's more information coming this month. When that is, there's like 3 more weeks. So
what month
we'll see.
Did we find out the price of the PS4 and Xbone? That was the E3 announcement, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was E3 because Microsoft said their stuff, and then Sony was like, $100 cheaper.
Yeah.
Reportedly, they
Like
made
the
that
same
decision day of.
Yeah.
Like they saw their price, like, okay, here's our price.
Yeah, so that was June. They released in November. We are now in almost mid-August, and we can presume it'll probably be out in November. I wonder if that's going to affect pre-orders.
I don't think so.
Probably not. Not for the initial batch, at least. But still.
Yeah, I think, and apparently, like most companies, they're doing better than they normally do this time of year for games stuff. So I think people are gonna either make room for consoles, or I think we're gonna see some real shitty scalping, like more so than usual.
Yeah,
but yeah, we'll see.
But, hey, Andre, speaking of pre-orders and things you might not want to pre-order.
Spider-Man thing.
Spider-Man.
And Avengers.
That's not a pre-order.
It's not a pre-order.
You threw me off with the pre-order.
This is I could do a 3-hour podcast on just this topic, and we're already long. But
yeah,
oh my god,
we don't need to do that. But yeah, so Spider-Man, we touched on it briefly earlier. Spider-Man will be the exclusive to the PlayStation version of Avengers. They have not, everything they've said has made it sound like this is not a timed exclusive. This is if you want to play Spider-Man, you need to own a PlayStation and need to own the game on PlayStation.
They in fact indicated that if you are on other platforms, you will see people playing as Spider-Man and you will not be able to play as him yourself.
Wow.
That doesn't even make sense because the game doesn't have crossplay.
But it's supposed to eventually.
Yeah, eventually.
They have said that they are going, that they want to implement crossplay, and people were like, well, what if I'm cross-playing? And there was that really bad interview that whoever it was like, yeah, well, we can put Spider-Man anywhere. You can interact with Spider-Man anywhere. And it was like, oh, so you're telling me my friends are going to get on and be playing on PC and I cross-play with them. And then they're going to be like, well, I wish I could play Spider-Man and see me swinging around as Spider-Man. It is just like,
yeah, it's shitty.
Also, you can engage in that conversation without it having to be Microsoft blank. It's a frustrating trend I've seen where people are like, hey, and I have said, hey, this is really shitty. And the response is, well, Microsoft would do it too. And it's like, yes, and it would be shitty if they did it. Like
what Microsoft should do is get Blade.
They shouldn't. No one should. Yeah. Make the game available for people.
The name of that fallacy is called tu quoque.
Yeah.
Fair.
Let's see.
It's bad.
Yeah, it's
well, maybe in that case, Rocksteady's newly announced game, Suicide Squad, will do it for you. We don't know what this game is. They're going to apparently tease it on the 22nd. Yeah.
You mean the Rocksteady game that we've been waiting like 5 years to hear, like what they're working on, and like there's been all this anticipation building up, and like people are like, what are Rocksteady doing? Where are they going to announce it? How did they announce this amazing property?
They worked on this game for 5 years and they just tweeted it out.
Honestly, I love it. I'm super into it. I think this is how it I think that this hype bubble bursting pop thing needs to happen more often.
This also leaked a couple weeks ago, which was, and it was spot on where they're going to show it and what the basic, like the name of the game is.
My theory is they were working on a Superman game, like everyone thought they were after Arkham, and then they came to the realization that most developers come to after they've already made a finished product, which is that you can't make a good Superman game. And then they said, let's not do that. Instead, let's try something else.
Well, apparently WB Montreal was working on a Suicide Squad game until 2017, and that got canned. So, and then this game, so it's been like 3 years since they've been working on this one, it sounds like, unless they took what WB Montreal was doing, but I doubt that. I don't know.
I can think of one good Superman game.
And is it the side-scrolling one?
No, it is Saints Row 4.
Well, sure.
So yeah, that's going to be the 22nd, I think, at the DC Fandom.
You want to talk about
Sunday
into the room? If you say in a Discord room, I don't understand why people like Suicide Squad, just prepare yourself.
Yeah. Although I kind of wish that someone would help Rocksteady. Like, they're stuck. Like, they've been stuck in this little DC niche, and I'm like, I want to help them. And I'm like, either like, because that's not even like the strongest part of DC's comic canon. They do magic. They do magic really well, and we haven't had a game for that. And that's weird.
Okay, let me hit you with this one.
Yeah.
Rocksteady's new game, screen fades up and you hear a voice.
Oh no.
And it says, "Who is John Galt?"
Oh no.
from
Rocksteady Studios, exclusively on the Nintendo Switch.
Why do you hate?
It's just a PowerPoint presentation, really.
It's not. It's going to be exclusive to the Intellivision Amico. Thank you very much.
No. Moving on.
We'll also, I believe, see that Court of Owls game.
That I'm more interested in, actually.
That sounds like it's closer, and the Suicide Squad game will only be a tease. Maybe that'll be a next year game. Or
I'll say right now, if it looks like the Suicide Squad cast in this game purchased their wardrobe at a Hot Topic in 2004, then I will not be playing Rocksteady's Suicide Squad game, which is what it looks like in the film Suicide Squad, which I detested.
Yeah.
I bet it'll be similar to the Batman stuff.
Probably.
I don't know if that is the best aesthetic either for that, but we'll see.
Yeah. Speaking to what Jeff was saying, though, I can only think of one developer who's managed to kind of work with DC properties and still have a little bit of an escape, and that's NetherRealm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like at least they get to do their own stuff also, even when they're making Injustice every other iteration.
Yeah. Traveler's Tales 2 has done a pretty good job of.
Oh, that's true.
They dip into the Lego DC stuff, and then also they're also doing other cool stuff. So.
Yeah. And Telltale.
Rocksteady did a good job with those Batman games. There are certainly issues you can address with them, but like
they're good games.
They're some of the best superhero games out there. So
I would agree.
Up next on the news, speaking of just tweeting it out, it wasn't a tweet, but basically all Nintendo's doing now is going, hey, here's a trailer for a game that's dropping in like 2 months, which is Pikmin 3 Ultimate or something. They're the extended, the more Pikmin edition. Oops, all Pikmin.
Oops, all Pikmin. Yeah,
it's coming to Switch in November, I think, October.
Something like that.
October. It's October 30th, and it is no longer available for purchase on the Wii U, apparently.
Yeah, that's the weird thing.
I saw someone earnestly saying, like, Pikmin 3, now who's going to say where are the games? And I was like, me still, actually.
I mean, When did Pikmin 3 originally come out?
2017, 2016.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I've never played a Pikmin game.
they're fine.
2013.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
Jeez.
Whoa. I tried to play a
So-
Pikmin game. I don't particularly like them, but that's
So-
cool for people who do.
So yeah, they got the games. They got the 7-year-old games. Oh yeah. Whatever.
Oh, it's supposed to still be that Mario stuff coming, but
I'll believe it when I see it.
their whole strategy has been very odd.
I mean, I think they've
Like on one hand, yeah, just put out a trailer for a game that's out in 2 months. Like, who cares? We don't need a direct. Like, there's no like conference where there's a lot of people and they need to go to the floor to play a bunch of games. You're just like, hey, this game's out in 2 months. But the way I don't know, the games they're choosing, and like Pikmin, okay, I guess. But why not? If they've got like other stuff, like if this Mario stuff is happening, why not tell people? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
To me, Nintendo's so weird. Like, I know a lot of this is probably calculated, but it just kind of feels like they kind of bumble through every generation, and then sometimes it really works.
Yeah.
Like the Wii, they just kind of bumbled into a giant success, and they're like, all right, cool, let's go with it. And same with Switch right now. It's like they just kind of wandered into a total success. Like, yes, they designed the Switch in a way that's appealing to mainstream and hardcore alike, but it just kind of has the look of just a company's just like, oh, okay, we're good now.
They succeed in spite of themselves.
Exactly.
At times.
That's a better way to put it.
Speaking of succeeding in spite of yourself, Riot Games will hold the League of Legends World Championships in Shanghai this year. For some reason, the entire thing won't take place there. The original plan was to tour around China and have like promotional matches all across the country, but that is being cut down. They will only be doing the finals or like top semifinals and stuff in Shanghai in the big soccer arena there. It doesn't seem smart.
No, with an audience, like, God, what is wrong with them?
I think in some ways it's probably fine depending on where, because like there's actually some conventions and stuff going on in New Zealand right now, and it's fine because
New Zealand, but
like,
I don't think they're like having people come in from out of the country.
Exactly. So like I think there are places to have events where it's fine. I don't know. I don't currently know the situation in Shanghai. I know in Beijing they're starting to get a bit more cases again, which is shitty.
Yeah.
I don't know about Shanghai, but like if it is a New Zealand situation, that's probably all good. Beep beep beep. But also I do think it's a very stupid decision.
Yeah.
And it's I think I've been on record as not being a big Riot fan, so that's probably not surprising.
There are admittedly there are complications if you want to do this as do the 2020 World Championship with getting international teams together to play, because internet latency, it's a problem.
Yeah, very true.
But also maybe call it off one time, because they're going to do it in China next year too, assuming things don't get worse. They'll go back to China to make good on the doing all the like the touring stuff, but
yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know.
Poor decision.
More China news. Trump signed an executive order that says all transactions with TikTok, with Tencent and ByteDance need to end within 45 days or something. All the transactions with these companies need to end. ByteDance, owners of popular teen social media app TikTok, and Tencent, owners of WeChat. Yeah, well, specifically this order, supposedly, it is not clear from the order, but clarification from the administration, which is worth as much as something that doesn't weigh very much. is
Wait, let me see if I can get a poop out real quick. It's worth about that.
They say this is only in regards to WeChat and will not affect Tencent's stake in Epic Games or the fact that they own Riot Games.
They didn't
Blizzard
know.
And
they didn't know that Tencent had their fingers in as much stuff when they signed this executive order.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to assume the administration that's currently in power does not really think things through.
Or know the things to think through about those things.
They
wouldn't even they don't even have the breadcrumbs to start thinking.
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts on this, and we don't have to dive too deep into it. But there was a lot of really unclear language about the bans that were taking place because they just said transactions, and then other places reported that it's financial transactions. But okay, let's say for the sake of argument, they're saying financial transactions, and they're going to ban WeChat. I have WeChat. I have a lot of Chinese friends, and that's how we communicate. And WeChat Pay is huge in China. It's it was basically the precursor to your whatever, the Apple one and the Google one, where you can load your credit card into there and tap your phone. And in some ways in China, it is almost like a bank. So some people use it like a bank, like an online bank, and that's normal. However, WeChat Pay does not exist in the US based store or the US based version of WeChat. So there isn't really any way to do financial transactions in WeChat.
This doesn't have anything.
If you're in the States.
It doesn't have anything to do with actually taking any action. It's just a political move for the election in November. It's just a way to leverage yellow scare tactics to buy votes from moderate voters who are afraid of China. So that's all that this is. And if it were a better administration, I would say there's something to analyze there and more to look at. But since that's all it is, it's very shallow. So it's not even really
big Chinese corporation.
Make them look bad and get votes from people who are afraid of China.
It's profoundly stupid. We could dive deep into it, but I don't think we need to at this point. It's just
that's kind of what I'm getting at.
It's profoundly stupid, and it's not going to have any impact.
Nope. You will still be able to download TikTok in 50 days.
Whether it's owned by Tencent or
it doesn't matter. It's not going to do anything.
Who cares?
Yeah.
Well, speaking of Microsoft and other companies that want to harvest all your data, Tencent, ByteDance, and Google and Apple, it sounds like xCloud and Stadia will not be coming to iOS because Apple said no. Didn't seem like they're just nah, they don't fit our store. We want people you can, I don't know. Basically, they want more of a cut. And
I think
they want any cut. They don't want an external store that doesn't go through Apple shit.
They can't control the games that are on Game Pass. They can't control the stuff on Stadia, which is what they say. But they can't. But it's really corny.
I think that's real to an extent because you can buy things through external storefronts. You can use the Xbox app to purchase games, as I understand it. So I think it's more that they can't control that interaction.
They can't control what I watch on Netflix either.
But they know what's on Netflix, and
they can just as easily know what's on on Stadia.
So I think
there's only 12 games on Stadia.
I think the security concern for them, I'm not saying it's valid necessarily, but I think the security concern for them is that you're remoting to another machine and you're not, you're interacting with it. I'm not saying it's valid. I think that would just be their argument.
I think that sets such a double standard because there's Microsoft 365 or Office 365.
Oh, no,
on iOS.
no doubt.
This is very directed at game stuff, and I don't know why. Because there are a billion services, there's Dropbox on iOS.
They want people playing Apple Arcade games.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
That,
with their PS4 or Xbox controller, which they're happy to advertise they support.
The bottom line is if this stuff takes off and if it becomes a major feature on Android that lots of people end up using, then it will come to iOS. done. That's how they always have done this stuff, is they resisted it.
And they'll act like they were so brave.
Yes, they'll act like it's a huge innovation to bring it to iOS.
Now we have widgets.
That's totally what'll happen. And frankly, from what we've seen, I don't see any reason to care one way or another about this at this point, because it's not like Stadia and xCloud are blowing the doors off of Android.
Heavily disagree. I think this is Apple holding all the cards, because streaming is going to be the future. Whether it's Stadia or xCloud or some new player in the future, it doesn't matter, because I think we
maybe
are
Apple.
Maybe Apple, but
yeah,
I think we are going to get away from hardware, and I think people are going to want to play these games on the devices they have with them most often. There are a lot of people who have Apple devices and are steadfast fans of Apple devices and will stay on Apple devices for the foreseeable future. And if they want to get into streaming gaming, they're going to want to do it on their Apple device. And Apple is saying, okay, like they're being the gatekeepers at this point. Like they could say, we're letting xCloud through, and that's going to be the one that's going to succeed. Like, I think it's a power play in some ways, and I think it's also setting a really shitty precedent.
So let me clarify what I'm saying. Right now, those services are not useful really to the end consumer. Like Stadia is kind of a mess, and xCloud, I think the only game really playable on it right now is Master Chief Collection. I actually agree with you 100%. The reason they're saying this now is so that they can watch these things develop and then pick the one that is going to be the most profitable for them to do what you're saying with and allow that one through. So I totally agree that it's a huge deal for the future. And I think that they recognize that and see right now that it's not going to influence a person's device choice, where those things are right at this moment, but it might in a year. So yeah.
Which I think is kind of, again, shitty practice, but that's just my
absolutely
feelings.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
Let's see. Well, speaking of Xbox and Sony, well, we weren't talking about Sony, but Xbox, as they came out and said, hey, your Xbox One controllers are going to work with the Xbox Series X, backwards compatible, the accessibility controller, all that good stuff, just going to work with the Series X.
Nice.
All right. I don't think they've shown any new controller stuff with the Series X, right?
I don't think there is a new controller.
Yeah, so
I'm sure there'll be some new design elements, but I don't think it's changing mechanical perspective.
Yeah.
And I think it was kind of
if you bought a Pro controller with the Elite controller, that'll work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to worry about that.
But yeah, I think it was in response to the PS5 story, was it not?
Maybe. Which was Sony listed out, okay, here's the deal with peripherals going forwards. You got a driving wheel or a fight stick, anything like that. It'll work on the PS5. If you've got a PS4 fight stick or driving wheel, it'll work on the PS5. Assuming it's USB or I don't know.
Yeah.
Headsets like the PlayStation Gold headset or whatever, that'll work. PlayStation Eye camera, that'll work. You have to get an adapter from them, which will be free. But the thing that really irked some people was that DualShock 4 controllers will work with PS4 games on the PS5, but will not work forwards to PS5 games. So if you get I don't know, Gang Beast 2 on the PS5, and you've got one DualSense controller and 3 DualShock 4s, you can't play. You gotta get some more DualSense.
Yeah.
There are some new features in that controller that make certain things you're not going to get the best experience if you play it this way, but also you buy for multiplayer stuff, it seems like that should be fine. You buy a PlayStation, you're going to get a DualSense. At least with your first person games, that should be okay. So.
I'm just really worried about the accessibility stuff.
That's my thought too.
PS5, because whenever I hear about the trigger button resistance stuff, I'm like, oh, that's not good. And the fact that they're closing off the DualShock as an option, I'm just like, oh, come on.
You must be able to turn that stuff off, the resistance stuff. You would hope. You would hope that they would be we're going to support the Microsoft accessibility controller, but
one would hope.
It would be a good thing for them to say, ostensibly
Yes.
3 months before the release of the console.
They both, I think, just need to, Microsoft less so, but I think both of them need to like do here's the console, here are the new like features of the generation, like we're to walk through them, because like they've kind of done Sony's done some like stuff with Wired and like, oh, here's like some, oh, you can get into games real fast and stuff like that, but like show it in motion, show what the box is capable of outside of just games.
Show the
Really.
price.
Andre, for motion, that's fine because the Move controller still works with the PS5.
Yes, it does.
Moving
Anyways,
on.
yeah.
VR will still work with it, but that's just HDMI stuff, so you just need the box. But
There's been a lot of news this week where my response has been, "That's dumb."
Yeah.
Actually, you know what's cool is they're like the new camera for the PS5 has built-in background removal.
Oh, nice.
So if that's something you're into, like Zoom here has built-in background removal. The NVIDIA cards are supposed to have that coming soon. The RTX cards are at some point will have like built-in background removal and like AI face tracking and stuff like that. But for now, one last news story.
It's a big one.
Is it that the lovers are winning 20-6 against the shoe thieves?
Oh my god, 20?
What?
That's scary.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Equally, you know what I love? Fast and Furious, and Fast and Furious
Vin
Crossroads came out, and kind of no fanfare at all. It was just like suddenly, oh, it's out.
Wasn't that the game that like closed out the last Game Awards?
I believe so. Yeah.
That was their like, oh,
It looked
and one last
so
thing.
bad. It looked so bad.
Let's pull up the Steam store page.
Oh yeah, I want to know if it where the reviews went.
Crossroads. I believe it's negative. Mostly negative. 21 reviews. 33% of the 21 reviews are positive.
It's $60.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Yes, it is a $60 game.
Jeez Louise. Boy howdy.
It looks like this is just one of the races for like the trailer on the Steam page. This is just one of the races from Forza Horizon 4, or maybe it's 3. But it's got
it's
chasing
3.
it.
You're chasing it and trying to blow it up.
Yeah, this is the guns mounted on top of this car. This is not my Fast and Furious.
No. It also looks terrible.
Yeah. I saw Jeff Grubb saying it's very much Burnout 3, and also that maybe it's fun, but the PC port is real rough. So maybe on console it's better. I don't know.
Burnout 3 is good. So,
I love Jeff Grubb.
Great.
I love Jeff Grubb. I don't know how much I trust some of his opinions.
It seems
he has some interesting taste.
It seems like the PC port is just absolute garbage.
Yeah, maybe it's cool. Yeah, it could be, because he's right a lot too.
Yeah, so PC port is garbage. So don't get it there. You could. Oh my god, they've got like a thing. They flashed a big thing that said takedown. And
it has season passes,
and it's also 50 gigabytes, and it has no keyboard controls for PC.
Yeah.
Wow.
I see a lot of greatest hits from the movie. If you dragging a big thing behind a car.
If you buy it before September 7th, you get a launch pack that includes 3 unique wraps for playing online with, because it's also online.
Oh, I thought you meant
My
raps
name's
as in
Vin
like
Diesel,
from
and I'm
Ludacris,
here to say,
no, like wraps.
I love driving cars in a furious way.
Wraps for your car.
Okay, that makes more sense.
The wraps for your car. I'm Vin Diesel, and I'm here to say I love driving cars in a furious way.
We're gonna have to request the developer for a code for this, I guess.
Slightly Mad Studios. Need for Speed Shift. Project Cars? What?
Yeah,
okay.
That's the thing, is they have made good driving games before.
Yeah, I was gonna say that name is very familiar.
Project. Okay.
Yeah. Project Cars is great.
It's a Bandai game, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, we published. Yeah.
God, that's so. What a thing.
Yep.
Oh, what a thrill. Yeah, well, that's going to do it for news this week, at least what we saw. Thanks for joining me, everybody.
Thanks for existing, Andre.
You know what? I do my best. You can find me doing my best sometimes over on Twitter at Coolslaw, COOLSL4W. And you can find me on Twitch 3 days a week, twitch.tv/coleslaw, COLESL4W. COL. Yeah, I know how to spell my name. Pat, where can people find you?
You can find me at PJC Plays, and I have also been streaming on Sundays on our Twitch channel, which is, I believe, Gaming Fyx on Twitch. I always mess it up.
That's the one.
You can also just find me hanging out at the Hot Dog Fingers Memorial Climate Pledge Garage and Parking Facility.
Jeff, where do people find you?
So people can find me on Twitter, where I'm busily ranting and screaming into the void and complaining about literally everything, but also doing things. At Stranger, as in not someone you know. Peace, as in peace in the Middle East. At Stranger Peace. You can also find me if you lay down the right candles and say the right words, and I'll appear in your living room and I will give you a lesson on Fitch proofs.
Sick.
Excellent. Alex, where can people find you?
Well, I'm going to be invoking Jeff's name, and I think we all know what the invocation is, and it is, who is John Gull?
This is not the first time we've made this joke, is it?
No.
I feel like we had one of our podcast titles was "Who is John Galt," wasn't, or something?
I don't know.
I could have sworn.
The Eternal Spectre.
Yeah.
In more ways than one.
Spectre haunting Europe. It isn't Marx.
You can find the podcast on Twitter at Fyx Podcasts, and you can go to fyx.space where we've got a review, 2 reviews. We got some reviews up.
Yep.
And more coming.
I have a couple in the works.
All right.
I want to review Tsushima, but I just haven't had a lot of motivation to play it this week. So hopefully I'll get back on the literal horse, which is named Sora canonically, this weekend.
I have a review in the works for a very relevant game right now, Doom Eternal.
Nice. I should have done that.
Well, we are in hell, so.
Yeah. They announced story DLC for that.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
I didn't see that. I guess I should hold off on my review then.
Yeah. Let's see. Podchaser.com/Gaming Fyx. You can head there and leave us a review to help us improve and, make us be a better podcast. If you missed it last week, and for the last 3 months or 5 months, I don't know, a long time, Spotify is updating again with our podcasts.
Yeah, it is.
So thanks for Alex for getting that together, working again, and the people at Spotify who helped us. That's going to do it. Thanks for joining us. Your host, Andre Cole here, aka your partner's favorite self-help tip, on episode 133 of the Gaming Fyx podcast on August 8th. Thanks for joining me, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.